My proud older brother graduated from the University of Tokyo and is a promising government official. As for me, I have no impressive academic background and work quietly as an editor for a modest magazine. Due to circumstances, our divorced parents took us in separately, and we've lived our lives under different last names. One day, my brother got engaged to the daughter of a high-ranking bureaucrat, but her arrogant father declared, "You're not family," and excluded my mother and me from the family meeting. On the wedding day, the father-in-law went as far as to insult me, saying, "Leave, you middle school graduate." However, the moment my mother called my name, my brother's in-laws started trembling all over. My name is Theodore Smith. I'm 31 years old and currently working as a company employee. I recently switched jobs to a small publishing company, thanks to a connection I made at my previous job. Though I'm still getting used to some aspects of the work, I enjoy it and feel fortunate to have great colleagues. Especially Mr. Nelson, the company president, who feels like a second father to me after my real one. I also have an older brother who's 5 years older than me. His name is Charles Yates. The reason our last names are different is because our parents divorced when I was about to start elementary school. At the time, I was too young to fully understand why, but apparently, differences in their parenting philosophies led them to go separate ways. My brother went to live with my father, while I stayed with my mother. From as far back as I can remember, sharing a bed with my brother was a given. I still vividly recall how something felt overwhelmingly missing the first night I slept in a bed without him. That's when I stopped being Theodore Yates like my father and brother and began using my mother's maiden name, Theodore Smith. Every time my belongings were labeled with Theodore Smith during school preparation, it felt oddly unfamiliar, as if they weren't really mine. I was too accustomed to Theodore Yates, so Theodore Smith felt strange. But contrary to my mixed feelings, my mother, Sophia, smiled warmly and said, "Honestly, I like the name Smith better than Yates. Don't you think it's a prettier name? I actually wanted your dad to take my last name when we got married, but because of family and work circumstances, it wasn't possible. I'd be happy if you grew to like your new name, too." Her cheerful demeanor made even my young self realize this divorce wasn't something to despair over. I'll try to get used to it. Still, I felt a bit frustrated that while I was so sad about our family splitting up, my mother seemed completely unfazed. However, once our separate living arrangements started, I realized we weren't exactly estranged. In fact, I think my parents got along relatively well even after the divorce. My parents discussed it and decided that I would attend a different elementary school from my brother, one in the neighboring district. However, despite being in separate school zones due to an invisible boundary, we lived relatively close to each other. It was a distance that even a young child in the lower grades could easily walk back and forth between our homes. Whenever one of my parents had to work late, they coordinated so that the one who finished earlier would take care of me. Since my grandmother lived with my father and brother, I often ended up staying at their house. I have to work late today. I've already let your dad know, so since it's Friday, you can stay at his place tonight, okay? Yay! I get to play with Charles until just before bed. I was so excited about spending time with my brother that I actually looked forward to my mother's late nights. On days I went straight to my father's house after school, taking a different route from my usual path filled me with excitement. Even when my grandmother offered, "Shall I come pick you up from school?" I would refuse. I suppose I was at that age where I wanted to prove I can do it on my own. I'm home. Theodore, welcome back as well. My 6th grade brother, who always came home later than I did, would return to the house where my grandmother and I were waiting and warmly greet me with "Welcome home." My brother, who was preparing for his middle school entrance exams, must have been busy studying. Yet he never showed any sign of annoyance and always spent time with me. You're a genius, Charles. Middle school entrance exams must be a piece of cake for you. Will you help me with my homework? Sure. But honestly, the real genius is you, Theodore. I just have the talent to work steadily and consistently. If anything, I'm more of the studious type. With his calm personality, my brother smiled as he said that. Perhaps because of our age gap, I can hardly remember us ever having a sibling fight. For me, it felt natural, but as I grew older, I finally came to understand that I was simply fortunate to have been blessed with such a wonderful older brother. Then, 25 years passed, and my brother, now 36, announced his engagement. During that time, he had stayed on the elite path without faltering. My brother entered a prestigious all-boys private school with an integrated middle and high school curriculum and passed the University of Tokyo entrance exam on his first try. After successfully graduating in 4 years, he became a government official. In other words, he became a bureaucrat. He joined the Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry. It is almost guaranteed that he will be appointed as the minister's executive secretary once the current one retires. My brother, brilliant and of impeccable character, is the pride of our family. When he told us he had found someone he wanted to spend his life with, our family was overjoyed. I was genuinely happy, as if it were my own good news. That said, not all of us could celebrate. Our grandmother, who had lived with my brother, had sadly passed away. I wish I could have introduced my future wife to Grandma while she was still alive. That's not something you could have helped. You hadn't even met her yet at the time. Besides, wasn't Sarah the one who supported you when you were grieving? In a way, Grandma might have been your Cupid. When I replied, trying to cheer him up, he smiled gently, the same calm smile he always had since we were kids. We had come to visit our grandmother's grave after my brother informed us of the wedding date. Watching him clasp his hands in prayer and speak sincerely to our grandmother, I was once again impressed by his integrity. Even amid his busy schedule, he took the time to honor the memory of a deceased family member. This made me respect him even more. When our grandmother passed away 3 years ago, I'm sure my brother wanted to mourn deeply. But it coincided with a particularly hectic period in his career as a bureaucrat, and he couldn't afford to take much time off. He took only the minimum bereavement leave and returned to work almost immediately. Known for his composed and reliable work ethic, my brother maintained a poker face, even as he carried the weight of losing a beloved family member. Yet, one of his subordinates, Sarah Owens, saw through his stoic facade. An exceptionally capable woman. She discreetly covered for him by fixing minor mistakes he rarely made in preparing materials in advance to ease his workload. She did all this without drawing attention to herself or taking credit for her efforts. But my brother, who was always incredibly perceptive, surely noticed. He expressed his gratitude by treating her to dinner, which became the starting point of their relationship. It was only after they began dating that he learned she was the daughter of a senior bureaucrat. When he went to introduce himself to her parents and ask for their blessing, her father, Miles, initially opposed the match quite vehemently. After visiting the grave, my brother and I spent a rare evening alone together, sharing drinks and catching up. My brother, sharing the story that only now he can laugh about, turned the intense words he received from his father-in-law upon their first meeting into a humorous tale. After introducing myself, my father-in-law said, "Did you deceive my daughter just to cozy up to a high-ranking bureaucrat like me?" I couldn't believe my ears. My brother's future father-in-law is a director at the Department of Education. Without a doubt, he is a high-ranking bureaucrat. However, even among bureaucrats or within government ministries, it's rare to encounter someone who openly refers to themselves as a high-ranking bureaucrat, which reportedly left my brother quite surprised. You're an elite bureaucrat whose future is already promising, so you don't need connections to high-ranking officials to succeed. It's ridiculous to assume you'd marry just for personal gain. Well, don't take it too hard. The father-in-law probably has had experiences with people trying to approach him for their own benefit. So it's not surprising he's overly cautious. My brother, ever magnanimous, laughed off the disrespectful attitude his father-in-law showed during their first meeting. "He's fond of you now, isn't he?" "Well, yeah, I guess, sort of. My brother, who usually speaks with such clarity, gave a hesitant response, which made me curious. The last time I saw Sarah, she mentioned, my father and Charles get along well now, which had reassured me. But could the reality be less rosy than I thought? I couldn't help but worry, was there still some lingering tension between my brother and his future father-in-law? This is a lifelong relationship. As you meet more often, he'll get to know you better, and things will naturally improve. Yeah, I guess so. I felt as though there was a hint of unease deep in my brother's eyes. So I made a conscious effort to sound upbeat as I encouraged him. Wanting to boost his confidence, I deliberately added a touch of humor to my words. Not only are you brilliant and mild-mannered, but you're also destined to be a devoted husband. Any father with a daughter of marriageable age would kill to have a son-in-law like you. As his younger brother, I'm proud of him. And even from the perspective of another man, if I were to introduce someone to a friend, he'd be the ideal recommendation. Theodore, you're too biased. I'm not such an extraordinary person. You're exaggerating. My brother humbly said this with a wry smile. But his modesty aside, my words weren't far from the truth. It's because your love for Sarah is genuine that her father finally gave his approval for the marriage, right? Apparently, my brother had visited Sarah's family multiple times to greet them and formally request their blessing. With Sarah's support and his own earnestness, he eventually earned their trust. By overcoming challenges together with Sarah, your love must have deepened. Who knew you were so passionate, Charles? I was half joking, but also half serious. Given my brother's calm and composed demeanor, it was hard to imagine him showing intense emotions or making bold declarations. Talking about love stories with you is embarrassing, so cut it out. My brother's cheeks turned slightly red as he gave a shy laugh. But as he responded to my playful remarks, I noticed his tone becoming brighter. It became clear to me that the ones who could stir change, whether for better or worse, in his otherwise even-tempered emotional state were Sarah and her family. All I could do was hope that my brother's married life would be a happy one. A month after our visit to the cemetery, my brother invited my mother and me out for a meal, saying, "The wedding invitations have been printed." On that day, the unease that had lingered in my brother's face seemed to have lifted, replaced by a refreshed, clear expression. With wedding preparations ramping up and work piling on, I probably won't have much time for close family moments like this. It seems Sarah deliberately chose not to come along this time. In fact, neither my mother nor I have met Sarah's parents yet. Of course, we've met Sarah herself several times. When they started dating with marriage in mind, my brother introduced her to me and my mother. Sarah was such a wonderful person that I was genuinely thrilled to welcome her as my sister-in-law. I feel like I've gained a daughter. I've only ever been a mother to boys, so I might overlook some things. But don't hesitate to consult me about anything. The day Sarah was introduced to us, my mother was visibly overjoyed. And it was no wonder that this was the first time my brother, who had been focused solely on academics during his years at an all-boys middle and high school, had ever introduced a girlfriend to the family. Just as Charles told me, "You're such a youthful and fashionable mother." Oh no, I'm getting ahead of myself calling you that. At the time, they weren't officially engaged yet, so she seemed embarrassed for getting ahead of herself by calling my mother mother. Sarah's face, and even her ears, turned bright red. "You're adorable. Please, feel free to call me mother, or you can just call me Sophia. Then, if it's okay, I'd like to call you mother." Honestly, my own mother isn't fond of me growing my hair long or dressing up. It's a bit presumptuous, but if you don't mind, I'd love to go shopping with you sometime and get your stylish advice. From the very first meeting, my mother and Sarah hit it off immediately. My brother and I watched their interaction with warm smiles. In fact, they've even met up without my brother on several occasions. Which is why I found it puzzling that my mother wasn't invited to the formal family meeting. My father-in-law has an exceptionally strong sense of family. He believes marriage is about the union of two families. And since our mother divorced our father and no longer shares the Yates name, he sees her as unrelated. My brother said apologetically. If he didn't invite me, it's fine, but to exclude the very mother who gave birth to you just because of a divorce? That's incredibly disrespectful. I pressed, but my brother only looked troubled. Though they work in different ministries, meaning the father-in-law isn't his direct superior. It seemed my brother couldn't go against the words of such an experienced and senior bureaucrat. I felt a surge of anger towards Sarah's father for trying to exclude our mother. It doesn't bother me. It's true I'm not part of the Yates family anymore. Besides, I know Sarah is a wonderful person, and that's enough. They're inviting me to the wedding, and I'm looking forward to seeing them on their big day. My mother, who never sweats the small stuff, responded in her usual carefree manner. Having been a decisive and action-oriented person, she had steadfastly supported me as the head of our household after becoming a single mother. She's always had nerves of steel. Thanks to her work, which often involves interacting with people from diverse backgrounds, she has a broad capacity for understanding others' perspectives. Long before the term diversity became trendy, she had been embodying it in her words and actions. If he's so particular about the engagement ceremony, there's no way he won't scrutinize the wedding guest list. Are you sure this will be okay? I couldn't shake the feeling that Sarah's father viewed the wedding as a stage to flaunt his connections and preserve his reputation. There was no way my sharp-witted brother hadn't picked up on his motives. As I was lost in thought, my brother lifted just the right corner of his mouth. It was a habit of his whenever he was scheming something. I've made arrangements for the wedding. You and Mom will be seated in the same family section as Dad. He handed us the wedding invitations as he spoke. 6 months later, the long-awaited wedding day finally arrived. The ceremony was a traditional wedding held at a historic shrine. The reception, set to accommodate about 100 guests, was to be held in a large hall attached to the shrine. Before the ceremony, a family introduction was planned, where the families and relatives from both sides would gather together. The limited number of family members attending the family introduction were scheduled to gather in the family waiting room earlier than the other guests. When I entered the waiting room, neither my father nor my mother was there. As I sat awkwardly on a chair in the corner, Sarah's father, Miles, approached me. "Are you Charles's brother by any chance?" The room was mostly filled with older attendees like uncles and aunts, so I suppose it was easy for him to guess I was the younger brother. On the other hand, I already recognized Miles's face from a family photo Sarah had shown me. "Yes, I'm Charles's brother, Theodore." "And you must be Sarah's father, correct?" Feeling genuinely happy to finally greet him, I responded with a smile. "Yes, that's correct. But I see no reason for you to act so familiar with me." "Excuse me." I knew I wasn't being recognized as family since I wasn't part of the Yates household, but I hadn't expected such outright hostility. It left me momentarily speechless. "I've heard about your background. Honestly, I don't think someone of your stature is fit to be associated with the distinguished Owens family. I told Charles not to include you in the family introduction, yet he defied me and brought you here." Miles's anger toward my brother was palpable. I couldn't help but feel uneasy, wondering if he was referring to that part of my history, so I cautiously asked, "By background, what exactly do you mean? There's a part of my past I'd rather others not bring up." "Well, according to Charles, you only have a middle school education. You're a perfect example of the bottom rung of society. To have someone like you claiming to be my family is an embarrassment. I reluctantly allowed you to attend the reception under the condition that you wouldn't sit in the family section. My highest level of education is middle school. Since that's an undeniable fact, I couldn't argue back." Mistaking my silence for hurt, Miles pressed on. "Before your recent job, you were probably just a temp worker, weren't you? And now you're working as a lowly editor at some small publishing company? Editors don't create anything themselves. They just ride on the coattails of authors. He sneered as he spoke. I don't mind you criticizing my education, but mocking the dignity of my supervisors and colleagues at the publishing company affects their honor. I'd like you to retract that statement about my profession. I couldn't help but respond heatedly. I didn't care how much he insulted me, but I couldn't tolerate him looking down on my colleagues. Don't talk big, you insolent brat. Miles spat dismissively. I believe bureaucrats hold a prestigious and vital role in society. But isn't your work behind the scenes? Supporting the government rather than directly running it? In that sense, it's quite similar to an editor's role in supporting authors. My words made Miles raise his voice angrily. Don't act like you know anything, you lowly editor. Budget proposals and parliamentary documents, those are just part of our job. High-ranking bureaucrats don't work behind the scenes. It's the opposite. We manipulate politicians to do our bidding while pretending to serve them. That's a terrible thing to say about your peers. When I replied, exasperated, Miles's face turned red with rage as he continued. People like you who switch jobs lack loyalty and reliability. You're useless and have no right to speak about professions. Excuse me? As I reacted to his words, Miles smirked and added, someone like you, what, second career? You're like used tea leaves. Pour hot water over them again, and they'll only produce weak, tasteless liquid. That's all you are, discarded dregs. He smirked and gestured as if to shoo me away. Leave, you middle school graduate. Miles let out a triumphant laugh for some reason. He seemed to mistakenly believe that calling me a middle school graduate was the most effective way to hurt me. The relatives, who had been silently watching with bated breath, began murmuring uneasily. It was no small thing for the bride's father to yell leave at the groom's brother, and the tension in the room was palpable. At that moment, my mother entered the waiting room dressed in a black kimono. Theodore, sorry for the wait. It took longer than expected to get dressed. Your father will be here soon too. Both my father and mother had opted for traditional Japanese attire and had been getting dressed at the venue's salon. Since my mother hadn't heard the exchange between Miles and me, she didn't realize how tense the atmosphere in the room had become. She glanced briefly at Miles, who was standing directly in front of me. Noticing his formal black kimono, which clearly signified high status, she immediately deduced that he was the bride's father. Nice to meet you. I'm Sophia Smith, Charles's mother. What? Sophia Smith. Miles's face turned pale in an instant. Oh dear, did Charles forget to even mention our names to you? My mother, surprised by Miles's unexpected reaction, hastily replied. Since you're divorced and no longer part of the Yates family, I told Charles not to mention his mother and brother. Miles, now recognizing her name, immediately understood who she was. His haughty demeanor quickly changed, and he responded in a quiet, uneasy voice. I see. So you weren't told about Theodore either. Allow me to formally introduce him. This is Charles's brother, Theodore. What? You mean Theodore Smith? Miles's face turned even paler. I just heard the name Theodore Smith. Could it be? Is he really that Theodore Smith? Murmured some of the bride's relatives, creating a buzz in the room. Suddenly, the entire family on the bride's side began to tremble visibly. Could it possibly be, are you the Theodore Smith who became a professional shogi, a traditional Japanese board game player as a teenager? Before I could respond, my mother proudly answered on my behalf. Yes, that's him. Theodore is just as much of a pride and joy to me as Charles is. My mother always praises me like that, but for me, having retired as a professional shogi player at 30 is a part of my past I'd rather keep hidden. The experience of failing to sustain a long career and facing setbacks is hardly something I can take pride in. To begin with, my professional shogi career peaked at my debut and was devoid of any real glory. Only a handful of predecessors became professional shogi players during their middle school years. Every single one of them later became a legend, creating a legendary legacy. I first participated in the 3rd Dan Rank League of the Shogi Promotion League as a 9th grader, raising hopes that I might turn pro while still in middle school. Unfortunately, I couldn't make that dream a reality. As an elementary school student, I had made a name for myself in the shogi world and was thought of as a prodigy. But in truth, I was simply enthralled by shogi and spent countless hours playing it. Unable to juggle multiple commitments skillfully, I decided not to attend high school, so I could fully focus on advancing through the 3rd Dan Rank League. Fortunately, by the time my peers reached their senior year of high school, I managed to turn professional in my 5th attempt. However, I soon hit a plateau, failed to win any titles, and never achieved any notable success before retiring. The professional world of shogi demands not only intellectual ability but also physical endurance. I think what I lacked most was the mental fortitude to keep going. My father, mother, and brother often encouraged me, saying, "Just becoming a professional is an incredible achievement. You should be proud of yourself." But I could never truly feel that way. I struggled with the gap between the ideal version of myself in my mind and the reality. And it pained me even more to feel like I was starting to dislike the game I had loved so much. So, before I grew to hate it entirely, I decided to step away from shogi. To fill that void, I took the high school equivalency exam after retiring and managed to pass. I guess I wasn't famous enough for you to recognize me right away, huh? You're kidding. You're definitely famous. When the media sensationalized your debut as a teenager, you still had the innocent face of a young boy. Honestly, your current image is so different that I didn't realize it was you until I heard your name. Miles's attitude completely flipped as he suddenly became deferential and switched to polite language. I was left stunned by the stark change in his demeanor. Shogi is often called a battle of intellect, and only a select few can go pro. It's truly admirable. I respect that. Even if I was a pro shogi player, it doesn't change the fact that I'm a middle school graduate. If academic background is your standard for judging people, I should still fall short. Well, Miles stammered, visibly flustered. At that moment, the groom and bride entered the room, already dressed for the ceremony. Though they were supposed to meet us in the family introduction room, they had apparently rushed here after hearing about the commotion. "Charles, you're awful not telling me your brother is Theodore Smith, the 6th Dan rank player, right? You should have introduced him." "Well, wasn't it you who said that anyone who left the Yates family name wouldn't be considered a relative and didn't need to be introduced?" My brother spoke with a pleasant smile, but his eyes weren't smiling at all. "And no one told me that your mother is the renowned scholar and professor, Miss Smith." For some reason, Miles directed his irrational anger at my brother. Charles, tired of repeating the same response, chose to remain silent. In truth, our mother was also well known in certain circles. While not a graduate of the University of Tokyo, she was a professor at a prestigious university and had even overseen the creation of elementary school ethics textbooks. It wouldn't have been surprising if Miles, a high-ranking official in the Department of Education, was familiar with her name. I tried introducing them to you many times, but each time, you brushed me off. Sarah, dressed in her elegant white wedding kimono and supposedly at the peak of happiness, twisted her face in frustration. But the seating chart I checked didn't have the names Sophia Smith or Theodore Smith on it. If I'd seen those names, I would have realized it beforehand. The seating chart you received was a dummy. I made sure of it to prevent you from interfering with my mother and Theodore sitting in the family section. What are you talking about? When my brother handed us the invitations and mentioned that he had taken measures, I finally understood what he meant. "I'm sorry for making you feel uncomfortable, Theodore. The reason he ordered that you and Mom not be invited to the family introduction or the meeting isn't just because you're no longer part of the Yates family. The main reason is that having a middle school graduate as a member of a bureaucratic family would harm appearances. My brother looked deeply apologetic. I had an inkling. Don't worry about it. I had hoped to persuade him before the wedding day, but he wouldn't listen. I'm truly sorry. My brother bowed his head to me, even though he had done nothing wrong. Hey, Dad. Are you satisfied now? You've always ignored my feelings and tried to manipulate everything your way. Whether your daughter is happy or not doesn't matter to you, does it? What? That's not true. Sarah, her face on the verge of tears, spoke out. Do you see this as the special day when your cherished daughter becomes a bride? Or do you think of it as a party to entertain people you want to maintain connections with? There was an expression of resignation on Sarah's face. Charles gently held her hand. That's not true. Miles's tone weakened as his daughter's piercing words hit the mark. This is Charles's and my wedding day. It's a day to introduce our lifelong partners to our guests and pledge eternal love. Ideally, we'd have had a small ceremony attended only by those who genuinely celebrate our happiness. Tears streamed from Sarah's eyes, threatening to ruin her beautifully done bridal makeup. She's the mother who left Charles after the divorce. Why would you want someone like that to celebrate this day? Miles seemed to insult my mother to deflect criticism from himself. There were unavoidable circumstances behind our parents' divorce. What? 25 years ago, you know that our father worked as a secretary for a prominent politician, don't you? Indeed, there was a reason why our family had split into separate family registers, our father and Charles on one side, and my mother and me on the other. Charles began to explain the circumstances we faced at the time and the truth behind the divorce. Back then, our father was serving as a policy secretary for a high-profile politician. One day, suspicions of a slush fund scandal surfaced involving this politician. Although our father had no involvement, he faced the risk of being scapegoated, which could have resulted in his arrest. To protect my mother and me from any fallout, my parents decided to divorce. At that time, I was a kindergartner who had already started playing shogi and had won tournaments for students under elementary school age. So my parents had high hopes for my talent. They likely worried that if our father were arrested, it would leave a permanent stain on my records. If they were concerned about such damage, my brother would also have been at risk. However, being a sixth grader at the time and already considered a prodigy, my parents decided to be honest with him about the situation. My responsible brother had already chosen his path, deciding he wanted to become a politician in the future. He was observant of political and economic trends, and based on his assessment of the police's actions and the circumstances surrounding the politician, he concluded that neither the politician nor our father was likely to be arrested. Believing it would be advantageous to continue using the Yates name, he chose to stay with our father. Our grandmother, who didn't want to part with Charles, the eldest grandson and future heir, also influenced this decision. Of course, as a mother, it was natural for her to want to shield both of her sons from any potential harm. She initially insisted on taking custody of both of us. However, our father, who strongly believed in respecting a child's autonomy, honored Charles's decision. Ultimately, these differing approaches to parenting led to their divorce. But it wasn't a divorce rooted in hatred or bitterness. It was more of a staged separation, and even after living apart, our family relationships remained harmonious. Unlike my own family, yours is a wonderful one where everyone genuinely cares for each other. That's why I decided I wanted to be part of it and chose to marry. Hearing Sarah say this about our family moved me deeply, and my chest filled with warmth. When I glanced to my side, I saw my mother was also touched, tears streaming down her cheeks. I had a faint hope that on our wedding day, my father might prioritize my feelings, but it seems I overestimated him. Dad, let's cut ties as father and daughter to mark this new beginning. It was clear that Sarah, after giving Miles countless warnings and chances to change, had finally reached her breaking point. Sarah, I understand how you feel, but let's not do this. That's right, Sarah. My mom and I aren't bothered by this. Let's commemorate this new chapter by letting it go. Cutting ties between parent and child is no small matter. Deep down, I believe Sarah didn't truly wish for it either. Despite his flaws, Miles would still be my brother's father-in-law. To make this a truly special and joyous day for their lives, we needed a fresh start. Sarah, I'm so sorry. Please don't say we should cut ties as parent and child. I beg you. I'll make an effort to change my ways from now on. Faced with Sarah's final warning, Miles seemed to realize the gravity of the situation. Even he, usually so arrogant, bowed his head in submission and apologized. Fine. I'll allow you to attend the wedding today as a special exception. But don't think you're completely forgiven. If you ever show disrespect to Charles or his family again, I won't hesitate to act. Make sure you remember that clearly. Sarah delivered her warning sharply. Seeing this unexpected stern side of Sarah didn't surprise me, but it made me feel that she was a dependable partner for my brother. Charles has his sights set on transitioning from being a bureaucrat to becoming a politician. A politician's wife needs strength, and Sarah showed she had it. Okay. I understand. Overwhelmed by his daughter's commanding presence, Miles nodded repeatedly and vigorously. I clapped my hands loudly. All right, everyone. Actually, the scheduled start time has long passed. The staff are probably confused and unsure of what to do. Let's wrap up the family introductions quickly and get ready for the ceremony. I deliberately used a bright tone to change the mood. That's a good idea. Sarah, head back to the bridal room and have your makeup touched up. My mother, ever adaptable, picked up on my intent and took charge with a positive outlook. Just then, my father strolled in, as if to say, better late than never. When I asked where he had been until now, he gave a pitiful reply. I was so nervous that I was hiding in the bathroom. After being forced into retirement when the secretary position he hoped to pass on to my brother was taken by the son of a politician, my father lost the air of a trusted aide to a powerful figure. He now exuded the warmth of a friendly, ordinary man. However, his entrance softened the previously frozen atmosphere, transforming the mood completely. Finally, the family introductions before the ceremony were conducted in an abbreviated manner due to time constraints. Afterward, the wedding ceremony at the shrine's main hall and the reception proceeded smoothly without any further issues. Looking back, I was relieved that the conflict had been resolved within the family waiting room, away from the guests, sparing us from any embarrassment. With the issues resolved, both Charles and Sarah looked radiant, appearing like the happiest couple in the world. Seeing my beloved brother receiving blessings from so many people moved me deeply, and I couldn't stop the tears from flowing. As there were many guests, I hadn't expected to be asked to give a speech. However, as a surprise from the bride and groom, the MC handed me the microphone. Charles, Sarah, congratulations on your marriage. Charles, you've always believed in me and protected me. Overwhelmed with emotion, tears blurred my vision, and my words faltered as my heart swelled with gratitude. I managed to compose myself and express my heartfelt thanks, and I was met with warm applause from all the guests. I used to think I might be fine staying single forever, but seeing how happy my brother and his wife looked, I realized that marriage might not be such a bad thing after all. More than anything, seeing my parents, both crying tears of joy, made me want to show my gratitude and be more filial to them. I've tasted failure in the world of professional shogi. However, that experience has allowed me to find a new way to connect with the game as an editor writing articles about shogi. Though I once came close to hating shogi, now I'm working to promote it in a different way, supporting those who dream of success in the game. On this day, when my brother and Sarah pledged eternal love and began their new journey together, I felt like I received a share of their happiness. I silently vowed to move forward with my own life with purpose and determination. My place card, this is. I just can't take it anymore. It was only 30 minutes after she left for the year-end party that my wife Rachel came home in tears. On the top floor of a luxury hotel, in the lavish banquet hall. What awaited her was a place card cruelly inscribed with the words "Seat for the useless employee." I have poured my heart and soul into this job. Every single day, I've worked so hard, putting everything into it. And yet, this is how they treat me. In front of everyone. Something this cruel. Rachel's trembling voice shook with anguish as her shoulders quivered. Tears streamed down her cheeks, smudging her makeup. With just a single slip of paper, her pride, her very life, was on the verge of being completely shattered. I felt a chilling calm take over my mind. Anger began to surge within me. They'd better be ready for this. I couldn't just stand by and do nothing about the man who drove Rachel into this state. My shaking fingers grabbed the phone. And that man, who had cornered Rachel, was about to deeply regret what he had done. My name is Samuel. Looking back, life used to be so carefree back then. Every morning, I would take a homemade lunch prepared by my mom to school. After class, I played with my friends, and at night, my parents and I would sit down for dinner together. I thought those ordinary days would last forever. My grades were always near the top of the class. I was particularly good at math and physics, and my homeroom teacher often said, "Samuel's way of thinking is on a whole different level." I loved nothing more than seeing the happy look on my mom's face when she saw my test scores. My dad would often pat my head and say, "Samuel, you'll be able to follow whatever path you choose in the future." On days off, I'd play baseball with my dad, or we'd go as a family to the local diner. Yes, we always looked forward to that once-a-month little luxury. Even though my mom worked at the diner, she always kept a cheerful smile on her face. My dad worked at a small factory. His paycheck was modest, but we were happy. But that peaceful life was shattered in an instant. A company run by my dad's friend went bankrupt. Since my dad had signed on as a loan guarantor, a massive debt of hundreds of thousands of dollars fell on our family. Unable to bear the pressure, my dad disappeared one day without warning. The entire debt fell on my mom's shoulders. My school uniform became worn, and even when my shoes got holes in them, we couldn't afford replacements. We didn't have the money to get my hair cut, so I let it grow until it was just barely within school regulations. The same people who used to say, "You're so smart," suddenly started avoiding me. Samuel's changed a bit, hasn't he? I heard his family's drowning in debt. His dad was a guarantor, and they lost everything because of it. How can he not be embarrassed wearing such a ragged uniform? They didn't even bother lowering their voices when whispering behind my back. It was like a complete flip of their attitudes. The girls who used to crowd around me, saying, "Samuel, you're amazing," when my grades were good, now wouldn't even meet my eyes. It's not like I wanted to live like this. Skipping breakfast to come to school, barely managing with a single piece of bread for lunch. And even that won't be possible starting tomorrow. This month's living expenses have already run out. Every night, my mom is hounded by collection calls, crying as she apologizes over and over. I couldn't stand to see her like that, so I decided to drop out of high school. 6 months into my new job, I spent my days mindlessly grinding down metal parts as instructed and endlessly cleaning the filthy workshop. I was convinced I was on the fast track to the bottom of society, walking a shadowy life where no one cared about me. Maybe it was because I always looked like I was sulking, but my coworkers and even my seniors gave me cold stares. It was rare for anyone to even bother talking to me. This boring life, or I just keep getting older, is probably how my entire existence will end. But then, an encounter with a certain person brought a ray of light into my life. "You're assigned to work under Kelvin starting today." "Huh? Why me?" "It's at Kelvin's request." The factory manager, Miles, suddenly told me this, and though skeptical, I headed to the designated workshop. Miles told me to come here." "Come in." I opened the door, and there was Kelvin, intently polishing his tools. Kelvin was a veteran craftsman who had been working here for 40 years. He was highly trusted not just by Miles but also by several of our clients. From today, I'll be teaching you everything I know. He was small in stature, with dark, weathered skin from years of working with machine oil, deeply lined wrinkles, puffy eyelids, and thick lips. His appearance gave off the impression of a stubborn, middle-aged man. He was a man of few words, and his thoughts were hard to read, which initially left me feeling bewildered. Why had Kelvin specifically mentioned my name? Here, try shaping this part. He handed me a bolt which was the kind I had been machining every day. All right. I positioned myself in front of the lathe. I set the blade to the bolt's groove just as I'd been taught. Sparks flew, and the piercing sound made me wince. Let me see that. I handed him the bolt in silence, and Kelvin inspected it with a sharp, piercing gaze. Then, he murmured a single phrase. Anyone who takes products lightly has no right to make them. Ha! I responded with an insolent attitude. But he paid no attention to it and continued speaking. Come to the workshop right now. Wait, what? Without giving me a chance to refuse, he led me away. Watch my hands closely. He picked up a component with his calloused and rounded fingers that were worn smooth from years of work. This is part of an aircraft engine. He said this as he turned on the lathe and calmly began carving grooves into the piece. The focused look in his eyes was the very embodiment of a true craftsman. Samuel, pay attention. Kelvin said this as he flipped the bolt upside down and rotated it, explaining as he went. A deviation of even 0.01 millimeters isn't acceptable. If even one of these parts is defective, hundreds of lives could be at risk. That's why you need knowledge of math and physics, along with years of experience and intuition. I stared silently at the part. The polished surface shone like a mirror. It looked more like a work of art than a machine component. You were good at math, right? Then calculate this angle. Caught off guard, I hesitated but looked at the blueprint on the wall and worked out the answer. Correct. But remember, that's just numbers on a page. From that point on, I received one-on-one training, where Kelvin meticulously taught me about the properties of metals, tool selection, and the fine adjustments needed for cutting angles. Watching his hands from the side, it seemed as though he was working through the process without much thought. But in reality, he was making precise adjustments through the feel of his hands and the subtle pressure of his fingertips. I found myself completely drawn in, and before I realized it, it was almost lunchtime. Be here first thing tomorrow morning. Training starts then. The next day, my intensive training with Kelvin began. The first task was to machine a perfect circle. If the angle of the cutting tool is off by even 0.1 degrees, the surface quality will change. Feel it. Watching Kelvin operate the lathe, it felt like he was playing an instrument with incredible precision. Just give it a try. The first week was nothing but failures. If I eased up even slightly, I'd shave off too much, but if I gripped too tightly, I couldn't control the pressure properly. Determined to figure it out myself, I stayed late at the factory after work, silently running the lathe and cutting metal day after day. This won't do. The groove here is too deep. I was so close. Muttering to myself about why things weren't going well, I kept replaying Kelvin's advice in my head. Looking back, I'm amazed that I didn't throw in the towel back then. That routine continued for 2 weeks until one day. You've done well. Kelvin picked up one of the many failed pieces piled up beside me and, for the first time, gave me a smile. I was so happy I could have cried, but I held it back and tried to act as if it were no big deal. But I'm still nowhere near your level, Kelvin. Of course not. You and I aren't even in the same league. His tone was harsh, but the kindness in his eyes was unmistakable. Hey, Kelvin. What is it? Why have you done so much for me? Before I could finish, Kelvin interrupted. I have a grandson who reminds me of you. He, too, almost gave up on his life because of his family situation. What? His father was in an accident, and the family finances collapsed. He almost gave up on his dream of going to college. But he worked at a factory during the day, studied hard at night, and eventually made it through university. Calvin. People who can work hard despite their circumstances are the ones who can take control of their lives. I saw that in you, just as I saw it in him. Calvin. His words slowly sank into my heart, spreading warmth through me. Calvin, I want to know more. I want to become a craftsman like you. The words came from the depths of my heart, born from the seriousness with which I had approached my work at the factory. The mentor standing before me gave me a quiet smile. You've finally woken up. That day remains etched in my memory. From then on, I began to take every task seriously. I arrived at the factory earlier than anyone else, meticulously cleaning from the entrance to the restrooms. I willingly took on the jobs no one wanted to do and stayed late, learning from Kelvin. He guided me through every step, from handling tools to mastering specific techniques. Samuel, you need to learn how to connect with people. That way, you won't have to carry everything on your own. Those words sank into my heart like a warm bowl of soup. Gradually, I began to get along better with those around me. Refusing to let unfair treatment from my seniors discourage me and actively taking on tasks others avoided, which eventually earned Miles's trust and led to me being entrusted with more critical tasks. Strangely, the frequent defects that had seemed inevitable began to decrease. Complaints from clients disappeared, and they praised the improved quality of our products. This recognition even led to new orders from additional clients. You've got a great mentor. At the year-end gathering that year, when Miles acknowledged my hard work for the first time, I finally felt like I had found my place at the factory. With my mother, we began to steadily chip away at my father's debt. I put all of my overtime pay, earned by giving up holidays, toward repayments, making slow but consistent progress every month. What had initially felt like an insurmountable amount was reduced by half over the course of 3 years. Samuel, you've worked so hard. My mother, with tears in her eyes, marked off each repayment on the monthly schedule. The threatening calls from debt collectors had finally subsided. At the factory, I had gained recognition, our household finances were gradually stabilizing. And I could feel the weight lifting from my mother's shoulders. She no longer had to work late into the night at the diner and had recently been able to come home on time. For the first time in a long while, we could sit down and enjoy her homemade dinners together at a leisurely pace. I'm so sorry, Samuel. Because of me, you had to give up school. Mom, this isn't your fault. Besides, I take pride in the life we're living now. Though my anger toward my father for abandoning us hasn't completely faded, I've gained the confidence to keep moving forward. For the first time, I felt like I could finally do something meaningful for my parents, who had worried so much about me. That realization hit me at that moment. 7 years into working at the factory, I was entrusted with increasingly important tasks and often found myself teaching the junior workers. I began to seriously consider dedicating my life to honing my craft and living as a true artisan, just like Kelvin. Yet, at the same time, another thought started to grow in my mind that maybe there was a different path I could take. I often read articles in the newspaper about small factories going out of business. No matter how skilled the workers were, if the business failed, both the techniques and the people were lost. The skills Kelvin had passed on to me surely held value that needed to be preserved for future generations. I want to learn more about management. This thought grew stronger with each passing day. I decided it was time to share my resolve with Kelvin. Then, softening his tense expression ever so slightly, he said, I see, I understand. If you've thought it through this much, then go ahead and give it your all. But, with those words, Kelvin placed his hand on my shoulder. Don't let yourself be blinded by money. Money is just a tool to measure true value. Taking his words to heart, I threw myself into learning about management and investment. Samuel, how are things going these days? One day, Kelvin asked me this as we sat down to eat. I set my chopsticks down on the table. Thankfully, I haven't suffered significant losses, but I've been keeping an eye on global economic trends. Do you plan to spend the rest of your life only trading stocks? What? What do you mean by that? You've changed a lot since you first came here. And I mean that in a good way. The way you've eagerly studied and sought to understand the broader world, even I have to respect that. But that's exactly why. Kelvin's eyes were more serious than I had ever seen them. Use that knowledge and those eyes to save someone. Kelvin. Those words became the foundation for what would later become Artisan Futures Capital. Understanding the value of craftsmanship and investing in its future. The thought of realizing Kelvin's spirit of craftsmanship in a new form filled me with excitement. Never forget your humble beginnings, no matter how successful you become. Every time I faced off with a renowned corporation that everyone knew, Kelvin's words echoed in my mind. And now, here I am, gazing at the sunset from a high-rise office in Tokyo's prime business district. It has been 7 years since I founded Artisan Futures Capital. What started with just 3 people has grown into an investment fund company with over 100 employees. Mr. Yates, here are the documents for the new investment project. As I glanced over the papers placed on my desk, my thoughts weren't solely on the numbers. I always thought about the technology behind them and the artisans who supported it. All right, I'll go to the factory myself to check this project out. Even though I now spent much of my time as the president meeting with executives from our investment companies, I made a point to visit the front lines whenever I could. Despite hesitant voices from employees questioning whether it was wise to stake everything on a struggling small-town factory, I trusted my intuition. Born from first-hand experience in the field, and successfully revitalized the factory, earning the title the savior of small-town factories in industry magazines. Thus, our assets under management have steadily grown, and these days, our fund is often highlighted alongside major investment funds as one to watch. It was around the time when the harsh winter cold had finally begun to ease that a request from an unfamiliar industry landed on my desk. We'd like your support in evaluating the introduction of a new caregiving robot. I promptly made arrangements to visit a care facility outside the prefecture. Today, at the facility director's request, I was scheduled to meet a female employee from Inesis, a renowned machinery manufacturer known for developing caregiving robots. This employee, though young, was said to be a highly skilled member of Inesis's Systems Research Division, working on cutting-edge robotic developments. Excuse me. The door to the meeting room opened, and a tall, slender woman walked in. Her hair was tied back, her makeup was minimal, and her clean-cut features made it immediately clear she was strikingly beautiful. Without realizing it, I straightened my posture. I'm Rachel from Inesis. Thank you for taking the time to meet with me today. Her poised demeanor prompted me to bow my head as well. I'm Samuel from Artisan Futures Capital. It's a pleasure to meet you. Samuel, let's get right to it. Rachel took out her tablet and began her explanation. The caregiving robot we're developing is designed to replicate human movements as closely as possible. Human movements? Yes. It might be easier to understand if I show you. Essentially, we've digitized the motions of expert caregivers, people renowned in the field, and incorporated that data into the robot's software. Each movement is analyzed in detail and programmed into the robot to adapt to the needs of those receiving care. Her words piqued my interest, and I instinctively leaned forward. I see. In an industry facing a severe labor shortage, this could truly be revolutionary. Rachel's eyes lit up. Exactly. Caregiving can't be done alone. That's why we focus on supporting caregivers by utilizing the expertise of experienced professionals through technology. That's our mission. Our conversation became increasingly animated as we delved into the technical aspects and discussed future possibilities. It's an honor to work with someone like her. After finishing the facility tour, we returned to the lounge. Sitting on a bench with canned coffee in hand, we reflected on the day. Rachel explained the robot's movements with animated gestures, her passion evident. It felt as though she regarded the people receiving care as if they were her own family. A warmth and kindness that came through in her explanations. "Oh, here, this is for you." I handed her a coffee I had picked up from a vending machine in the hallway. "Thank you. But, Samuel, you're not at all what I expected." "Huh?" Her sudden words nearly made me spit out my coffee. I quickly covered my mouth with my hand in a panic. "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean that in a bad way. It's just, I always thought investment funds were run by pushy, flashy older men. But you're surprisingly down to earth." Her cheeks seemed to flush slightly as she said this. Well, it's true that the term investment fund isn't exactly familiar to most people. I'm fully aware that this line of work isn't well understood." I said this with a wry smile, trying to brush it off and steer the conversation in a different direction. "By the way, is there a particular reason you became interested in caregiving robots?" She placed her hands, still holding the can of coffee, on her lap and began to speak. "My grandmother passed away when I was in high school. She spent her last days in a care facility, and I often watched the staff taking care of her. It always struck me how challenging their work seemed." She learned about caregiving robots during her university years. While studying advanced technologies, she frequently visited companies working on caregiving robots, and each visit left her deeply inspired. "I want to support people through technology. That's the foundation of my research." I found myself captivated by the resolute look in her eyes. "Samuel, you're from a small factory background, right?" "Yes." It was tough at first. From there, I began talking freely, sharing stories from my student days and my time working in the factory. "Even someone like you has faced hardships." She said this thoughtfully. "In this line of work, challenges are a constant." I gave a wry smile and took a sip of my coffee. "Thank you for today. I'd be happy to see you again." Rachel's parting words as I was leaving lingered in my mind, refusing to fade. After that, I found myself making excuses to visit her lab more frequently. Each visit, and every conversation we had, became the one thing I looked forward to the most. "Rachel." "Samuel, thank you, as always. How's everything going today?" As I handed her a bag filled with Japanese sweets, I glanced toward the robot in the back of the room. She explained that they were making final adjustments in preparation for the last round of testing. "I don't want to get in the way, so I'll just take a quick look and leave." As I adjusted my bags, Rachel hesitantly said, Samuel." "Yes?" I looked over to see Rachel hesitating, fidgeting slightly. "What's wrong?" I moved closer to her to avoid disturbing the other employees. "Do you have time tonight?" "What?" The unexpected question caught me off guard, and I felt myself blush despite my usual composure. She glanced around before leaning in to whisper in my ear. "If you don't mind, I'd like to have a one-on-one conversation with you." "I don't mind at all." "Good." Our eyes met, and for a moment, neither of us looked away. "Rachel, do you have any favorite foods?" She seemed momentarily taken aback by the abruptness of my question, but then, noticing my nervous expression, burst into laughter. "Did I say something strange?" "Sorry, Samuel. It's just that you're so confident and assertive when it comes to work, but outside of it, you're surprisingly innocent." "Well, I'm not used to this kind of thing. But I appreciate it. I like that you're so considerate about keeping a comfortable distance." Looking at Rachel as she spoke, I realized how strong my feelings for her had become. We started meeting outside of work more often, and it didn't take long before we became a couple. Eventually, we got married and started our life together as a family. A year passed. You're in a great mood today, aren't you? It had been 6 months since our daughter, Yvonne, was born. Today marked her first day at daycare. Rachel, eager to return to work as soon as possible, had spent her maternity leave tirelessly looking for a daycare center. Finally, she secured a spot at a certified daycare near our home. Balancing work while managing daycare turned out to be far more challenging than we had anticipated. Still, we worked together, adjusting our schedules and sharing the responsibilities of pickups, drop-offs, and caring for Yvonne. Rachel never complained, always greeting me with a smile when I came home, her strength shining through in every moment. But unbeknownst to me, Rachel's struggles had already begun. "Rachel, this project is being scrapped." The chilling words from her manager, Simon, froze the atmosphere in the meeting room. Rachel quickly tried to clarify. "But Simon, the project received excellent evaluations during the trial phase, and it's already been approved by the higher-ups." "Evaluations? What are you even talking about?" Simon scoffed dismissively. A sharp-tongued figure who had risen to the position of department manager after 30 years in system development. Simon had built a reputation for being brilliant yet ruthless. "Did you slap this proposal together in a rush before leaving early yesterday?" He flipped through the documents with a cold gaze. "No, I revised it several times." "Then why is the cost calculation so sloppy? And the market analysis? It's superficial at best." When Rachel tried to respond, he silenced her with a raised hand. "Besides, didn't you leave a meeting early last week because of daycare issues? Do you really think such a half-hearted effort will get an important project like this approved?" The snide remarks didn't end in the meeting room. "Oh, another call from daycare?" Simon's voice boomed deliberately as he addressed Rachel, who was holding her phone. Colleagues whispered among themselves, their murmurs barely audible but stinging nonetheless. Simon, seemingly satisfied, added with mock concern, "Parenting must be tough. It must be stressful not being able to focus on your work." Rachel, her shoulders hunched, left the office. It was only a matter of time before she found herself cornered in yet another meeting. It happened during a presentation led by Rachel for the major project aimed at the practical implementation of caregiving robots. Over several years, Rachel and her team had painstakingly built a foundation through detailed field experiments at caregiving facilities and cutting-edge AI research. Her colleagues, who had worked alongside her, fully understood and supported the project. However, as soon as Rachel finished her presentation, Simon let out an exaggerated sigh and leaned his arm on the table. "Ha! Rachel, haven't you said all that before?" "Yes, but we've conducted additional interviews in caregiving settings and refined the integration of AI with human interaction." "That human connection thing again? You really like that phrase, don't you?" Everyone in the meeting room looked at Rachel with sympathy, but Simon's dismissive remarks showed no sign of stopping. Maybe such a big project was too much for someone raising a child? Rachel's face stiffened at his words. "I admit, there were times when I caused inconvenience. However, I worked closely with my team during those periods to ensure everything was prepared. So you're aware you've been a burden. Well, in that case, how can we trust someone who only gives half their effort? Maybe this project itself needs to be reevaluated." Simon tossed the materials onto the desk as if they were worthless. The atmosphere in the meeting room grew unbearably heavy. Rachel bit her lip, unable to respond. 3 months had passed since she returned to work, but she had constantly felt like she was only halfway there. The pressure to keep up with her peers often left her struggling to make progress in her research. Even so, she had been trying to find her own balance between work and parenting. Simon's thoughtless remarks, however, cut deep, like sharp blades. "Simon." Rachel began speaking, struggling to keep her voice steady and firm. "This project relies on the voices from the field. Without them, we can't move forward. If I could just..." All right, I've heard it all dozens of times already. Simon glanced down at the documents, his expression openly irritated. Caregiving robots are a beacon of hope for the caregiving industry. We have to make them a reality. Please, at the very least, let someone from this team take responsibility and move the project forward. Come on, don't be so naive. Simon shifted his gaze toward her without moving his head. You may have gotten away with a few indulgences because of your past achievements, but that won't work with me. By next week, I want a completely new proposal unrelated to caregiving robots. With that curt dismissal, he walked out of the meeting room, leaving everyone in stunned silence. Rachel. Her colleagues called out to her with concern, their voices heavy with empathy. However, Rachel gently shook her head and said, "It's fine. Thank you, everyone. I look forward to working with you." Holding back her frustration, Rachel made her way toward the door to leave the meeting room. Oh, Rachel. I almost forgot to mention something to you. Simon re-entered the room, a smug grin on his face. You've been working a lot of overtime since coming back, haven't you? With such a young child, doesn't your husband have anything to say about it? My family supports my work. Oh, well, that's great. It's nice to have such an understanding family. The overtime wasn't by choice. It was caused by the countless menial tasks Simon kept dumping on her, forcing her to push her own work to the back burner. Hearing such a sarcastic comment from the man responsible made Rachel's face tighten with anger. I feel bad for your family, though. Having to deal with such a selfish person. Stop making assumptions without knowing the facts. But then, he said something truly outrageous. If you'd like to continue working at this company, there's always the option of shortened working hours. In that case, he leaned in close, his smirk growing wider, and whispered in her ear. Starting tomorrow, your desk will be moved from the development department to a corner in the general affairs section. That way, you can handle both work and parenting, right? What? But the reason I came back just now was to let you know. I'll hand over the details in writing later. With a triumphant expression, Simon left the room. This can't be happening. The sympathetic looks from earlier had vanished. Even the team members who had worked alongside her avoided her gaze as they quietly left the meeting room. That night, I'm home. As Rachel returned home, her voice trembling, she gently touched Yvonne's sleeping cheek, tears silently streaming down her face. Unable to bear it, I wrapped my arms around her from behind. I'm sorry. I've been so half-hearted with everything, and now everything I've worked for feels like it's been for nothing. As she sobbed uncontrollably, all I could do was stroke her shoulders, offering silent comfort. Before we knew it, the cold season arrived, bringing with it the busiest time of the year, which was December. The unexpected department transfer. To Rachel, it felt like nothing less than a demotion. For the first few days, she sat at her new desk, thinking back to her time in the development department, her chest tightening with each memory. But to her surprise, the people in the general affairs department were far warmer than she had expected. Rachel, let's take a tea break. Oh, is that a picture of Yvonne? She's adorable. I'm raising kids too. It's tough, but the people here really support me. Everyone spoke to her naturally, often offering advice about parenting. Here, there were no icy stares from Simon to fear. Rachel, the year-end party is coming up. This year it's at the top floor of a hotel. Really? Yes, come with us. Forget about that manager. We've got your back. Exactly. Let's unwind for once and have some real fun. Her senior colleagues spoke to her kindly. Rachel smiled modestly and nodded in response. The painful memories of the development department began to fade, little by little. I'm looking forward to it. Rachel applied light makeup, her heart fluttering with excitement for the dinner gathering after so long. Mommy, you look so pretty. Yvonne beamed at her, jumping up and down as if she were seeing a princess. I spoke gently as she finished getting ready. Have a great time tonight. But don't overdo it with the drinks. I know. Seeing Rachel smile like that, I felt an unexpected flutter in my chest. It had been so long since I'd seen her laugh so freely and innocently. All right, I'm heading out. Rachel left the house with a bright smile on her face. But just 30 minutes later, I'm home. What happened? I rushed over to her, and Rachel clung to me, trying to stifle her sobs as she began to cry. My place card, look at this. I just can't take it anymore. Collapsing to the floor, Rachel began to recount the cruel incident she had just experienced. The venue was on the top floor of a luxury hotel, offering a panoramic view of the city skyline. With Christmas just around the corner, a grand chandelier hanging from the ceiling bathed the room in warm light. And appetizers were already neatly arranged on tables draped in pure white cloths. Normally dressed in suits, the employees arrived in glamorous attire, gathering at the venue in small groups. The female employees had taken extra care with their makeup, while the male employees adjusted their ties. Their faces filled with anticipation for the annual year-end party. Rachel arrived slightly late. Stepping off the elevator, she walked down the hallway toward the venue, glancing at her reflection in the mirror. Her pastel-colored dress, so different from her usual lab attire, exuded an air of elegance and festivity. Sorry I'm late, huh? The moment she opened the door, she sensed something was off. Every employee's eyes turned toward her at once. In their gazes, she could see a mix of pity and discomfort, emotions she couldn't quite place. Noticing the awkward glances being cast her way, she wondered what was going on as she diligently searched for the seat assigned to her in advance. There it is, huh? What is this? Looking closer, beneath her name, it read seat for the useless employee. Rachel's seat is right over there. Simon's voice came from the side, but Rachel couldn't bring herself to look at her boss's face. See? That's your spot. I even made a special place card just for you. It's a perfect fit, don't you think? His tone dripped with mockery, and the smirk in his voice was impossible to miss. Oh, can't read it? Maybe, like your dreamlike ideas, you're too out of touch with reality. Rachel bit her lip hard, clutching her hands so tightly her nails dug into her palms as she fought back tears. What does this seat card even mean? Isn't it obvious? What? The secretarial staff gathered around Simon exchanged malicious glances and smirks. A person who barely does any work and still collects a paycheck doesn't deserve anything more. You should be grateful you even got transferred to another department. In that moment, something inside Rachel snapped. A wave of anger surged through her. You're wrong. Rachel's voice echoed across the banquet hall. My proposal isn't some fantasy. I've spoken directly with artisans, and enough. Simon's angry shout cut her off, silencing the room with its sharpness. The festive atmosphere of the venue froze entirely. It felt to Rachel as though everything she had built over 11 years had been shattered into pieces by that single seat card. Unable to bear it any longer, she fled the venue. Before she knew it, she was standing in front of her house. I can't do this anymore. Come inside first. It's cold out here. I gently wrapped my arms around Rachel's shoulders and guided her into the living room. Sitting on the sofa, Rachel remained silent, her head bowed for a while. In her hand, she clutched the place card tightly. Then, with a trembling voice, she began to pour out her feelings all at once. 11 years. For 11 years, I've worked with conviction. Sure, there were plenty of tough times, but whenever an idea struck, it was such a thrill to bring it to life with my team. But now, Rachel covered her face, her voice cracking with tears. Now I'm scared. Even when I have new ideas, I'm too terrified to speak up in meetings, afraid of what he might say next. I sat silently, listening as she continued. Ever since Simon came, he's rejected every single one of my ideas. He says AI combined with artisan skills is inefficient. But I believe in it. I believe that only by merging human warmth with technology can we create real caregiving support. Her hand tightened around the place card again and again. I'm used to being belittled. But today was different. In front of everyone, in such a humiliating way. Her voice faltered, and the tears she had been holding back spilled freely. Maybe I really can't do anything anymore. That's enough. I said it quietly but firmly. You don't have to say anything more. You've been through enough. I pulled her into a gentle embrace. Rachel, you've been doing so much balancing work, taking care of the house, and being there for Yvonne. That's more than enough. You've done incredibly well. The thought of someone breaking her spirit like this, someone as hardworking as her, was unbearable. I decided then and there to put an end to it. I grabbed my phone and dialed a number. Mr. Moore, I need to speak with you first thing tomorrow morning about Simon. After a brief pause, the tense voice of the company president responded. Understood. I'll see you in my office at 8 a.m. As I placed the receiver back down, I clenched my fist tightly, silently but with resolute determination. The man who had driven Rachel to this point would come to deeply regret his actions. Before 8 a.m., I arrived at the president's office on the 50th floor of Inesys headquarters. Normally, access to the president's office required going through a secretary, but today was an exception. Seated on the plush sofa, I noticed Mr. Moore occasionally glancing at me and then at the clock on the wall. 5 minutes to go. A sharp knock echoed through the room. Excuse me. The door opened, and Simon entered confidently, a teacup in hand. Completely unaware of my presence, he adjusted the collar of his expensive suit and turned to Mr. Moore. Good morning, Mr. Moore. The year-end party yesterday was a great success. Everyone seemed to enjoy the surprise with the place cards I prepared. With a grin on his face, Simon began speaking and finally noticed my presence. His face immediately shifted to one of clear confusion. Who might this gentleman be? My name is Samuel. I'm Rachel's husband. At my words, Simon's expression froze for a moment. But he quickly replaced it with a contemptuous smirk. Oh, so you're Rachel's husband. Do you have a complaint about your wife or are you planning to interfere with our company's personnel decisions? Let me make it clear. We are already burdened with the trouble of dealing with an employee who can't even balance work and parenting. Each word he spoke only fueled the fire of anger within me. I thought of how hard Rachel had worked to juggle her job and parenting, the sacrifices she had made. The image of that cruel place card at the party flashed in my mind, and my fist trembled. But I maintained my composure, slowly pulling out a business card and handing it to him. I'm Samuel, CEO of Artisan Futures Capital. In that instant, the arrogance melted off Simon's face like ice under a blazing sun. A figure known in the industry as the savior of small-town factories. Realizing that the head of a manufacturing-focused investment fund was standing before him, Simon's eyes widened in shock. You mean, you're... The arrogant, condescending attitude he had displayed just moments ago vanished. And Simon slumped into his chair as though his strength had left him. The look in his eyes betrayed clear fear. Simon. I spoke calmly, breaking the silence. Effective immediately, you are relieved of your position as department head. What authority do you have to do that? Our firm is your company's largest shareholder, holding a 15% stake. As the majority investor, surpassing even your main bank, I have the authority to make this decision. I see. Simon's face twisted into a bitter expression. I see, so that's what this is about. You're favoring Rachel because she's your wife, aren't you? At home. She must be nagging you every night about that place card. Poor thing, having to appease your wife's mood to the point of showing up at her company. In the end, an investor meddling in company personnel is just acting on personal feelings. Savior of small-town factories? What a joke! It's laughable, really. That's not true. I firmly denied his claim. I chose to invest in your company because I deeply resonated with its vision of harmony between people and technology. Preserving artisan skills and connecting them to the future is supposed to be your company's philosophy. Philosophy? Don't make me laugh. Simon raised his voice, his tone filled with disdain. Your wife keeps shouting about AI this and AI that, trying to take jobs away from artisans. How is that aligned with our philosophy? Is that really the case? I replied calmly. Have you even looked at her designs? That caregiving robot can't function without the expertise of skilled artisans. It's designed entirely around the premise of leveraging their craftsmanship. That's impossible. Last week, I visited the factory and showed Sarah's designs to the artisans, and they all said things like, "This will allow our skills to shine, and it's a great opportunity to pass our techniques on to the next generation." Simon's face grew pale. Someone who doesn't know the field, no, someone who doesn't even try to see the field, what could they possibly understand? I delivered my words sharply. Sarah has visited the field every week, listening carefully to the voices of the artisans. And you? You've done nothing but push people into corners with your theoretical musings. That's a lie. It's all lies, every bit of it. Simon suddenly shouted, his voice echoing in the room. He sprang from his chair, wildly flailing his arms, completely losing his composure. They all start with sweet words like that. Harmony with AI? Honoring artisan skills? Don't make me laugh. His eyes were bloodshot, and beads of sweat glistened on his forehead. I've seen it with my own eyes. I've seen artisans lose their jobs because of AI implementation, lured in with promises like, "Your skills are valuable, and let's create a new era together," only to be discarded in the end, and I've witnessed it time and time again. Watching so many artisans left stranded, their livelihoods destroyed. Simon, stop this. Just as Mr. Moore tried to calm Simon, the sound of the door opening slowly filled the room. Excuse me. An elderly man stepped inside. He had a small frame and hands weathered and darkened by years of factory work. It was Kelvin, my mentor, the man who had changed my life. Kelvin, I'm sorry to have called you here. I bowed deeply. As a representative of the artisans, I've asked my mentor from my factory days to join us today. Simon stared at Kelvin as if frozen in place. His voice trembled. Grandpa. Yes, Simon. It's been a while. Kelvin approached Simon, his grandson, with a gentle smile. His eyes held the same warmth they did when he guided me back in the factory. Simon, I understand your feelings all too well. You want to protect the skills of the artisans. You want to safeguard our world. That's how you feel, isn't it? Simon hung his head and gave a small nod. You've always been proud of our work as artisans. I remember how your eyes lit up every time you visited the factory, watching me work. Kelvin placed his hand on his grandson's shoulder. That hand bore countless scars, etched from a lifetime of craftsmanship. But that's why you were afraid, weren't you? Afraid that AI would take away our jobs, that artisans would lose their place. It must have hurt to think of our skills fading away. Simon's shoulders began to tremble. But you made a mistake in how you tried to protect it. You pushed people away and hurt them. How can you protect anything that way? Kelvin's voice was gentle but carried an unshakable strength. Samuel showed me Rachel's designs. They're not what you think. They don't erase our skills as artisans. They're a new way to pass our craft on to the next generation. But, Grandpa, do you remember? When you were working at the factory while attending college, you used to say all the time, I want to find a way to adapt to the new era while preserving the skills of the artisans. A faint glimmer of tears appeared in Simon's eyes. "Your feelings were valid," Kelvin said gently. "But in trying so hard to protect, you lost sight of what's truly important. The pride of a craftsman doesn't lie in hurting others. It lies in the determination to create something better." Kelvin looked intently into Simon's face. "The care you have for the craft and for the artisans, it's something that means everything to us. But that care shouldn't be used to hurt. It should be passed on to the next generation." Kelvin's calm words resonated through the room, carrying a profound weight. It was the same warmth and unwavering conviction I had felt back when he taught me in the factory. I stepped forward, speaking quietly yet with certainty. "Simon, if you take a closer look at Rachel's designs, you'll understand. That caregiving robot couldn't exist without the skills of artisans." Simon raised his head slightly, his eyes searching. "Each precision component of the machine requires the indispensable skill of artisans. A margin of error of even 0.1 millimeters isn't allowed. Such delicate craftsmanship is absolutely essential. That's why Rachel visited the factory so often, listening to the opinions and insights of the artisans." I glanced at Kelvin and continued. "But you refused to see anything. Deciding from the start that AI would take away artisans' jobs, and you never once listened to Rachel's ideas all the way through. Even though she never intended for anything like that from the beginning." Simon's expression wavered. "In fact, it's your dismissive attitude that risks undermining the work of the artisans. You were the one shutting the door to a future where new technology and traditional craftsmanship could coexist." "Me? Undermine the artisan's work?" The strength drained from Simon's knees, and he collapsed to the floor, sitting as if defeated. Covering his face with both hands, his shoulders trembled uncontrollably. "No, it's all wrong. I was trying to protect. Simon's tearful words echoed through the silent president's office. Kelvin slowly lowered himself to the floor, sitting beside Simon. "Samuel, please forgive him." Kelvin looked up at me. "Do you remember the story I once told you? About the young man who struggled with his family circumstances but worked his way up through sheer determination?" "Yes. I remembered." Kelvin often spoke about that person back at the factory. That young man was Simon. Kelvin gently patted his grandson's back and continued. "His father collapsed after an accident, and the family finances took a turn for the worse. He nearly gave up on his dream of going to college. But instead, he worked at the factory by day and studied tirelessly at night to put himself through school." Simon lifted his face and looked at his grandfather. His eyes were brimming with tears. He would arrive at the factory earlier than anyone, clean the floors, and willingly take on the jobs no one else wanted to do. Kelvin's voice carried a hint of nostalgia. "And when I fell ill, he even took a leave of absence from school to support the factory. He cared deeply about the artisans and cherished the field more than anyone." Kelvin turned to me. "That's why the fear of AI taking over the artisans' work clouded his judgment. His desire to protect the craft was so strong that it blinded him to new possibilities." I saw my former self in Simon. A figure desperately trying to rise above their circumstances. He had only misdirected that determination. I walked over to the window, gazing at the city lights, and began to speak. "Simon, Artisan Futures Capital has an affiliated company called the Manufacturing Training Center." Simon lifted his head slightly, listening. "It's a facility dedicated to the fusion of AI and artisan techniques. It brings together veteran craftsmen and young engineers to explore the future of manufacturing." Turning back to Simon, I continued. "We need your experience, your technical skills from the factory, your understanding of the field, and your knowledge of management. Use all of that to contribute to training the next generation of artisans in this new era." Simon's eyes widened in surprise. Then, slowly, he stood up. "But, am I qualified for that?" "You are," I said firmly. As Kelvin said, you care about the artisans and value the field more than anyone. All you need to do is direct that passion in the right way. Be the bridge between technical experts like Rachel and the artisans. After a long silence, Simon bowed deeply. Please. Let me try. His voice was quiet, but it carried a clear sense of determination. A look of relief spread across Kelvin's face. Simon's new journey was about to begin. A year had passed since that tumultuous time. Gracing the cover of the industry magazine Japan Manufacturing Innovation was the AI caregiving robot developed by Rachel. AI times artisans, the dawn of a new era. Under that headline was a large photograph of the latest caregiving robot AI gently assisting an elderly woman. That's incredible, Rachel. I murmured to myself as I eagerly read through the article. Spanning 10 pages, the piece was a glowing review of the system Rachel and her team had developed. At the annual exhibition, the Inesis booth was swarmed with industry professionals. Rachel, calm and composed, explained the system with confidence. She seemed like a completely different person from the Rachel who had come home crying after that year-end party. Now, businesses eager to implement caregiving robots continuously sought partnerships, and Inesis was overwhelmed with inquiries. Rachel received endless questions about new system installations and proposals for development projects, keeping her busy day after day. Meanwhile, Simon had also embarked on a new path at the Manufacturing Training Center. Simon, could you help me with this parts machining method? Of course. Let's check it out with the artisans together. The once overbearing demeanor was gone. Now, Simon stood as a bridge between the field's craftsmen and young engineers, bringing them together. At the training center, where the fusion of AI and craftsmanship was being pursued, Simon utilized his extensive knowledge and experience to their fullest. Thanks to Simon, I now have a much better understanding of artisan techniques. This reflected the trust he had earned from the trainees. Occasionally, Rachel was invited as a guest lecturer. She and Simon were often seen passionately discussing the coexistence of AI and humans. One evening, I stood on the balcony with Rachel, gazing up at the night sky. Yvonne was already fast asleep, her soft breaths filling the quiet bedroom. Hey, do you remember? Rachel asked softly. That night after the year-end party. Yeah. I pulled her closer. At that time, I really thought I was finished. But you stood by me. Rachel leaned into me, resting her face against my chest. You cried with me, you got angry for me, and you never laughed at my dreams. Of course not. I gently stroked her hair. I've been there too. Back when I was working at the factory, when no one paid any attention to me, Kelvin reached out and taught me the importance of believing in people. We're kind of alike, aren't we? Rachel said with a smile. We faced setbacks, we were saved by someone, and now we're trying to help others. Yeah, I guess we are. We sat quietly, side by side, watching the town light sparkle in the distance. Eventually, Rachel spoke with a determined voice. I'm going to keep working hard. I want to support the people in the caregiving field and create spaces where the skills of artisans can thrive. And I'll support you as best I can, as your partner and an investor. Thank you. Tears glistened faintly in her eyes. I'm lucky, aren't I? I have a job I'm passionate about, and someone who understands and supports me. From the bedroom, we suddenly heard Yvonne shifting in her sleep. We exchanged glances and couldn't help but smile. Yeah, we really are lucky. The night breeze gently brushed through our hair. Feeling Rachel's warmth beside me, I whispered in my heart. Everyone faces setbacks at some point. But as long as you don't give up, a path will always open up. And the ones who light that path are always the people who matter most, standing right beside you. Alright, let's do our best tomorrow. Yeah. We held each other's hands tightly and looked up at the night sky, waiting for a new morning to arrive. Tomorrow would surely bring new challenges. But there was no fear anymore. because we had an unshakable bond to carry us forward. Melissa, what happened to your voice? I asked her this because Melissa, my stunning co-worker with mixed heritage, had lost her voice and could barely speak. And of all days, today was the one with the crucial presentation that could decide the fate of our company. I knew how much effort Melissa had put into this, going so far as to gather representatives from overseas publishers to promote our company's works internationally. Because of that, I couldn't just suggest postponing it or scheduling another opportunity so casually. But with Melissa's voice in such a state, there was no way to proceed. She must have realized this herself. With tears in her eyes, she said, "Timothy, please help me." With a voice so sorrowful that it was painful to hear, she bowed her head. Determined, I quickly reviewed the presentation materials and prepared myself to take on this critical task on the spot. My name is Timothy. When asked what they've spent the most time on in life, many people might answer work. However, there are probably a few people like me who have spent a lot of time working but aren't particularly dedicated to it. Before the global pandemic turned the world upside down, I was the kind of person who worked just enough not to drag the company down and left the office promptly at closing time. One reason my approach was tolerated is that sales often relies heavily on individual performance. In the sales department, I was squarely in the middle, far from being at the top, but with plenty of people below me in performance. By maintaining decent sales numbers, I managed to avoid reprimands from my boss. I work at Greenleaf Publishing, a mid-sized company. We primarily handle comic books and light novels. Many authors start by establishing their foundations with us, and some go on to achieve significant success, securing serialization deals with major publishers. After taking a detour during college for a year, I started working at Greenleaf Publishing when I turned 24. Over the next 10+ years, I encountered my share of trouble, but I've now reached a relatively stable point in my career. It may not be exciting, but I didn't mind. I thought a life like this, steady and predictable, wasn't so bad. Then, one day, the sales department suddenly got a new hire. "Hi, I'm Melissa Suzuki. I've been speaking Japanese since I was a kid, so you can count on me. Looking forward to working with you." With her polite yet slightly commanding tone, she introduced herself. Her light brown wavy hair, sharp jawline, and striking features immediately caught everyone's attention. Her mother is American, and she had spent her life moving between Japan and the United States. After graduating from an American university, she had joined a publishing company there before deciding to switch gears. "I see potential in Japanese subculture, especially light novels and comic books, so I joined Greenleaf Publishing. I can also speak English, French, and Spanish, so feel free to reach out if you need help." The men in the sales department were obviously smitten by the radiant smile of the stunning, mixed heritage Melissa. Judging by her confident demeanor and the way she carried herself, I quickly concluded that she was highly capable. "It feels like someone from an entirely different world has joined us," I muttered to myself as I got back to my own work. As it turned out, my assessment was spot on. Despite joining mid-month, Melissa managed to rank in the top 3 for sales that month. A clear testament to her talent. Though she initially struggled a bit with the differences between Japanese and American business practices, her ability to quickly find her own way and adapt must have been the key to her success in securing contracts. Meanwhile, I kept working at my usual pace, letting the chorus of praise for Melissa drift over me. "Have a good evening, everyone." As I called out while leaving the office at closing time, no one in the sales department responded. Maybe they were too absorbed in their work, or maybe they didn't see people like me, who work at their own pace, as real colleagues. Their cold attitude might bother some, but to me, it didn't matter. I was already organizing my thoughts about what I needed to do after getting home when Melissa suddenly stood in my path, blocking my way. Melissa stood firmly in front of me with her arms crossed and demanded sharply, "Timothy, you're capable of so much more, aren't you? Why don't you put more effort into your work? Melissa leaned in closer, pressing her questions with an assertive tone. Although I was taller than the average man, her heels brought her nearly to my eye level. I felt an odd sensation, as if I were being cornered by an actress in a foreign film, but I shook my head slightly and replied, "Everyone has their own lifestyle, right? My performance isn't harming the company, so I don't see any real problem." I made sure to respond as calmly and unemotionally as possible. Melissa furrowed her brows and said, "That's not what I'm talking about. Even if you leave on time, there are things you could do, like increasing the number of client visits or creating clearer materials. To me, it looks like you're cutting corners in your work. When someone like that is in the team, it lowers the overall motivation of the department. What do you think about that?" She leaned in so close that our noses were just a few centimeters apart. Caught off guard by the scent of her rose perfume, I instinctively took a step back and replied, "I'm not cutting corners. This is the best I can do." I glanced around as I made my rebuttal. Melissa must have noticed that the other co-workers were now watching us. Melissa let out an exaggerated cough and leaned in to whisper near my ear, "Timothy, are you hiding something? Someday, I'd like to uncover your true self." With that, she walked away. The next day, as I prepared to start work as usual, I was suddenly summoned by Kevin, the head of the sales department. When I arrived at his desk, Melissa was standing beside him, looking as though she had been eagerly waiting for this moment. Frowning, I glanced at her, but Kevin beamed and said, "Given her exceptional performance, I thought it would be good for the other employees to learn from her American-style sales techniques." I discussed it with her, and she gladly agreed. "You're the top candidate to accompany her and learn from her methods." It's an honor, isn't it? So, what do you say? This is your chance to stand out. Standing next to the department head, Kevin, Melissa wore a triumphant expression. It was clear now that she had meant every word she said the day before. I was about to find a way to decline, but Melissa spoke up first. "I have no intention of interfering with Timothy's lifestyle. I'll do my best to ensure he can still leave on time. All I ask is that he accompany me on a few of my sales visits when he has time. If it doesn't work out, he can stop any time." Though she usually spoke with unwavering confidence, this time, there was a hint of pleading in her voice. That detail caught my attention, and after glancing between Kevin and Melissa, I finally nodded and said, "All right. I'll do it. Looking forward to working with you." From that moment, I began accompanying Melissa on her sales visits, and I quickly saw firsthand why she was so successful. Simply put, she excelled at using her diverse range of conversational tools at just the right moments. When a client shifted to casual small talk, she effortlessly chose topics that appealed to them, easing her way into their comfort zone and closing deals before they realized it. At other times, she passionately described the allure of the work she was promoting, using her enthusiasm to sway the client's emotions. Having spent much of her life in the United States, Melissa had a broad knowledge of global culture, ranging from films and fashion to sports and economics. Sure, she was as striking as an actress, but even without her looks, I had no doubt Melissa would deliver the same stellar sales performance based on her skills alone. No matter how exceptional she was, I had no intention of changing my approach. I continued doing the bare minimum required and left the office promptly at the end of the day. Melissa seemed disappointed by this, but she never stopped taking me along on her sales visits. During one of these outings, she revealed what seemed to be her true motivation. "I want to showcase our company's works to the world," Melissa said, clutching a light novel from Greenleaf Publishing in her hands. As she sat in the passenger seat of my car, her eyes burned with a fiery determination. While Japanese anime and comic books are popular overseas, Greenleaf Publishing's works have yet to break into international markets. Melissa fervently explained that these works, being of such high quality, represented a huge business opportunity if introduced globally. More than that, as a fan of Greenleaf Publishing's creations, She simply wanted as many people as possible to discover and appreciate them. 6 months into her tenure at Greenleaf Publishing, Melissa finally had the opportunity to make her dream a reality. Through her diligent networking with overseas publishers, she arranged a presentation to showcase Greenleaf Publishing's works. In a spacious conference room, representatives from more than 10 international publishing companies gathered. If this presentation went well, Greenleaf Publishing's works could spread across the globe. On this critical day, I was called upon as a support staff member. Knowing Melissa, she would surely handle it well. The presentation was to be conducted in English, but having worked at an American company, it should be no problem for her. But fate can be cruel, and accidents tend to strike at the worst possible moments. When Melissa finally arrived, late for the final pre-presentation meeting, her voice was so hoarse that strain didn't even begin to describe it. These days, most people stay home when they're unwell, but at the time, pushing through illness to come to work was still common. Though she had tried to mask it with makeup, her flushed face and watery eyes were clear indicators of her condition. Melissa, with her raspy voice, insisted she didn't have a fever, but regardless, presenting in such a state was out of the question. Maybe it's best to postpone, I thought to myself. However, knowing how hard she had worked to gather these international representatives, I couldn't say it aloud. Her complexion worsened as the minutes ticked by. 10 minutes remained until the presentation began. Judging that her condition made it impossible for her to proceed, Melissa looked at me with pleading eyes and said, "Please, could you present in my place?" She bowed her head with a raspy voice. Seeing Melissa quietly wipe away the tears of frustration streaming from her large eyes, I felt something stir deep within me. A feeling I hadn't experienced in years. All I need to do is present the works on that list, right? I asked, picking up a spare copy of the materials for the attendees and organizing the key points in my mind. Seeing her wide-eyed and nodding repeatedly, I nodded back and replied, "All right. I'll do my best," before stepping up to the task. At the start of the presentation, Melissa explained in her strained voice that she couldn't speak and had asked a colleague to take over. The room murmured with unease, but when I began speaking fluent English and said, "Don't worry. I'm quite the enthusiast myself, so I'll make sure to convey the full charm of each work," the crowd's surprise quickly turned to admiration. A glance at Melissa showed no hint of shock on her face. I'm pretty sure I never spoke English in front of her. That thought crossed my mind for only a moment before I dove into the presentation, passionately showcasing Greenleaf Publishing's works. Fortunately, I had read each of the featured works at least once, so I was able to articulate their appeal smoothly. To provide a clear framework, I started by mentioning well-known existing works and explaining that the featured works were similar to them. From there, I outlined their unique appeal, gradually capturing the interest and attention of everyone in the room. My strategy seemed to work perfectly, as nearly everyone raised their hand during the Q&A session after I finished explaining. One question, however, proved to be a bit challenging. It concerned the conceptual meaning of a specific term that appeared in one of the works. The question came from a representative of a French publishing company. While they understood the surface meaning of the term in English, they struggled to grasp its nuanced implications in their native language. The work I had introduced featured a unique world-building style, characterized by specialized terminology created specifically for its setting. Indeed, it could be challenging for non-native English speakers to fully understand the meanings of such specialized terms. I took a moment to breathe and refocus before replying. Let's see, in French, the term from that work would carry a meaning close to this. Specifically, I answered the question in fluent French. This surprised not only the person who had asked the question but also the other publishers in the room. After completing my response, I checked the list of publishers and, noticing representatives from Spain and Italy, I said in English, "I see we also have representatives from Spain and Italy. Allow me to explain this in their respective languages as well," before proceeding to deliver the same explanation in Spanish and Italian. By the time I finished presenting all 10 works in multiple languages, the clock had long passed noon. Even with a short break in between, I couldn't remember the last time I had spoken for such an extended period. The overwhelming fatigue, as if I had aged 5 years all at once, was worth it. Every publisher in attendance expressed their desire to publish Greenleaf Publishing's works in their respective countries, while the finer details, such as translation and distribution channels, would still need to be ironed out. Establishing this foothold was a significant first step. Great job. As expected, Timothy, you're amazing, Melissa said, offering her congratulations as she had fully supported me throughout the presentation. The word expected caught my attention, but what shocked me even more was her complexion. You should really see a doctor, I blurted out, unable to hold back my concern, as her face was flushed bright red. Melissa shook her head and said, I've occasionally had fevers like this since I was a child. I have some fever medicine at home, so I should be fine after taking it, but her legs wobbled, and she had to steady herself against the wall. I couldn't just leave her like this and return to the office on my own. Looking directly at her, I firmly declared, then at least let me take you home. If you refuse, I'll have no choice but to take you to the hospital. Perhaps because she wasn't feeling well, Melissa meekly nodded and said, All right, please. I'm not sure I'll even make it to my apartment once we get there, bowing her head slightly. 30 minutes later, I was supporting Melissa as we rode the elevator up to her apartment. Her feverish body radiated an unmistakable heat, which I could feel through our close contact. Even on the way here, I repeatedly suggested taking her to the hospital, but she adamantly refused, going so far as to threaten to jump out of the car if I insisted. The last room at the end, she murmured as we stepped out of the elevator. Following her instructions, we shuffled down the hallway, practically moving in sync, until we reached the final door. There, I spotted an elderly couple standing in front of it. I couldn't help but mutter, wait, as I recognized the man's face. Before I could process it further, Melissa, standing beside me, spoke words that took me completely by surprise. Dad? Mom? What are you doing here? Her hoarse voice prompted a reaction from the elderly couple. The man turned out to be none other than Thomas Suzuki, the president of Greenleaf Publishing. Beside him stood a foreign woman whose features closely resembled Melissa's, so she was likely her mother. Realizing that Melissa was the president's daughter left me stunned, and as I struggled to process the revelation, Mr. and Mrs. Suzuki began walking toward us. Taking over for Melissa, whose voice was still hoarse, I explained the situation in detail. When Melissa nodded in agreement with my explanation, Mr. Suzuki gave me a small bow and said, Timothy, I'm sorry for the trouble. I'll explain everything in detail another time. For now, I just want Melissa to get some rest, is that alright? He spoke with a fatherly concern I had never seen at work. Although I had plenty of questions, Melissa's health was the priority. I handed Melissa over to Mr. and Mrs. Suzuki and said, Understood. I'll take my leave, then. After bowing, I left the apartment. The next day, Melissa didn't come to work for the first time since joining the company, likely because her condition hadn't improved. Then the next day, Saturday morning, as I was enjoying a leisurely day off, my phone buzzed with an incoming call. The screen displayed the name Melissa. When I answered, her voice was still not fully recovered as she said, I'm sorry about the other day. If it's alright, could you come over? I'd really like to thank you and apologize properly. Don't worry, it's not a contagious illness, and I'm feeling much better now. Just a bit hoarse. I also had a few things I wanted to ask her, so I decided to take her up on the invitation. I had assumed her parents, Mr. and Mrs. Suzuki, would also be there, but when I arrived at the apartment, Melissa was alone. When I asked how she is feeling, she replied that she was fine, though her voice was still slightly hoarse. Thanks to you, the overseas publishers have decided to handle our works. I'm truly grateful, she added. When I responded that helping out a hard-working colleague is something anyone would do, Melissa frowned and said firmly, Anyone? Not just anyone could pull that off. She immediately shook her head and said, "Sorry, that's not what I meant to say," before pressing her lips together and lowering her gaze. As the awkward silence lingered, and I hesitated over whether to speak, Melissa raised her head. Melissa stared at me with a serious expression and said, "I heard about your situation from my father. I'm so sorry for saying such rude things. Assuming you were slacking off without knowing the full story." Her voice trembled as she apologized. It seemed that Mr. Suzuki, Melissa's father and the president of Greenleaf Publishing, had explained to her why I ended up in the sales department and why I approach my work the way I do. "No, it's fine. I understand how someone like you might find my attitude off-putting," I said, reflecting on my past as I spoke. When I first joined the company, I was assigned to the editorial department, where I learned the ropes from senior colleagues. In my third year, I was entrusted with my first solo assignment, managing a light novel author. He was Marcus Kennedy. Marcus and I worked tirelessly, side by side, striving to create the best work possible. I should have been the one to look out for him, but Marcus was so dedicated to his work that he ignored his own health. And I got swept up in his passion, working tirelessly without sleep, pulling all-nighters as a matter of routine, and even spending weeks shuttling between his workspace and the office without going home. After living like that for several years, tragedy struck. One day, when I visited Marcus's workspace, I found him collapsed over his desk, unconscious. Fortunately, his life wasn't in danger, but he decided to retire from writing light novels to focus on treating his illness. Later, I received a letter from him saying that, while his health had improved, he no longer had any intention of picking up a pen again. I got scared. When I dedicate myself to something, I lose sight of everything around me. That fear made me realize I could no longer work as an editor, so I confessed everything about Marcus's collapse to Mr. Suzuki, who was investigating the incident. Melissa listened silently to my confession. I remembered how Mr. Suzuki hadn't interrupted me once, patiently hearing me out. When I finished telling him everything, Mr. Suzuki said something that stayed with me. "Timothy, you were the one who discovered Marcus, weren't you? While others dismissed him as ordinary. You believed that polishing that uncut gem would make it shine, and you nurtured him into a first-rate author. It would be a waste to lose such keen insight. How about working in another department while sorting out your feelings? In the sales department, where individual results are valued, you could contribute while managing your fear of overcommitting yourself." Mr. Suzuki then asked for my cooperation with something. He wanted me to review the works brought in by aspiring authors and those that caused disagreements within the editorial department, providing my feedback. The reason I always left work on time was to spend my evenings reviewing manuscripts and compiling feedback. It was an important task that directly influenced the company's future direction. Since I found it hard to focus in the office, Mr. Suzuki graciously allowed me to adopt my current working style. "You were contributing to the company in a different way all along, weren't you? And yet, Melissa's voice trembled as she murmured after hearing my story. It wasn't surprising that someone like her might have taken the attitude she did without knowing the full picture. I wanted her to understand that I had already accepted this and didn't hold her responsible. When I reassured her, Melissa gave a sad smile and said, "Timothy, you're so kind. By the way, I don't think I've properly explained why I kept the fact that I'm the president's daughter a secret." She then shared her story with me. Before leaving her job in the United States, Melissa had a heated discussion with Mr. Suzuki. Melissa argued that Greenleaf Publishing should expand overseas, while Mr. Suzuki cautioned that failure was likely unless the company first solidified its reputation domestically. It was Melissa's proposal that finally brought their stalemate to an end. "I'll pave the way for overseas markets myself. You won't have any complaints if I succeed." Melissa joined the company under the condition that only a few senior executives would know her identity as the president's daughter. From there, She achieved remarkable sales results, proving herself and accomplishing her goal. She kept her lineage a secret because she didn't want her colleagues to treat her differently. It was truly a case of action speaking louder than words. I'm sure Mr. Suzuki was impressed. When I said this, Melissa shook her head vigorously. But I ended up getting sick at such an important moment and causing trouble for you. There's no way I could have handled it alone. Timothy, you really are someone I can rely on. This time, she looked at me with a relieved smile. Yes, what I wanted to know today was the true meaning behind the, as expected, that she occasionally let slip. You speak as if you've known me for a long time. Have we met somewhere before? Deciding there was no point in overthinking it, I voiced the question that had been on my mind. Melissa's large eyes widened even further as she murmured, "Ah, so you really don't remember," and her shoulders slumped. But she quickly raised her head, stood up from her chair, and brought up a nostalgic yet puzzling topic, saying, "Timothy, you used to visit the home of an American author named Amanda Fisher, didn't you? How do you know about that?" I asked, but before I could finish, she pulled a book from her bookshelf. It was a light novel published by Greenleaf Publishing 20 years ago. The cover was worn and stained, likely from being read countless times. The moment I saw the book, a flood of memories came rushing back into my mind. Fixing my gaze on Melissa, I asked, "Could you be Lisa?" The face of a young girl from long ago vividly appeared in my mind as I spoke. That's right. You may have forgotten my face, but you remembered this book. Hearing her mischievous laugh and childlike tone, I was reminded of my time studying abroad in college, when I stayed at Amanda Fisher's home in the United States. Amanda, who was a lecturer at the university I attended, often invited me and a few other students to her home as we studied American literature. It was there that I met Amanda's niece, a girl named Lisa. She was half Japanese but knew nothing about Japanese media, so I gave her an impassioned lecture on the wonders of comic books, anime, and light novels. Wanting her to experience them firsthand, I handed Lisa, who I now know as Melissa, one of my favorite works that I had brought from Japan. At the time, I was a child who loved nothing more than being active. Although my father worked at Greenleaf Publishing back then, he never forced me to read books. Attending an American school, I frequently visited my aunt's house because I wanted to play with her dog. But then you came along, Timothy, and completely educated me. There's no doubt that you were the reason I decided to work in publishing," Melissa said nostalgically, flipping through the pages of the light novel I had given her all those years ago. It was surreal to think that the young girl I had met back then had grown into such a stunning woman. As I marveled at the strange connection Greenleaf Publishing's works had forged between us, Melissa placed the book on the table and looked at me again. "Back then, I admired you for speaking so many languages and interacting effortlessly with other exchange students. Even Amanda confided to our family that you were the most outstanding among the students. That's why, when I reunited with you and saw you seemingly disheartened at work, I couldn't help but lash out. I had studied multiple languages to read literary works in their original form and to exchange ideas with peers from around the world. Even now, I love literature. However, in today's world of diverse entertainment, opportunities for literature to shine are rare. It was my hope that by introducing people to accessible forms of storytelling like comic books and light novels, they might one day develop an interest in literature. That's why I chose to work at Greenleaf Publishing. Sorry for showing such an embarrassing side of myself." "Oh, and my apologies. I slipped into casual speech because I can't help but think of you as the girl from back then." When I apologized for unintentionally switching to a casual tone out of nostalgia, Melissa shook her head. "Please, don't use formal speech. I already told you, didn't I? I secretly thought you were so cool back then. It was just a little admiration for an older brother figure at the time. But now, it's different. On the day I lost my voice, you helped me. and I found you incredibly charming. Even now, my heart races when I think about it. I don't think I've ever felt this strongly about someone before. I don't want to let this fate between us end here." It took me a few seconds to fully grasp that Melissa's words were a confession of love. Being confessed to by a woman 7 years younger wasn't something that happened often in life. And to think it was a woman I had reunited with in such a fateful way. Melissa looked at me with anxious eyes. Taking a deep breath to calm myself, I began to organize my thoughts and speak. To have someone as wonderful as you confess their feelings to me, honestly, it hasn't fully sunk in yet. But I'm truly happy. And I want to work hard to become a man worthy of you. If you're okay with someone like me, would you be willing to go out with me? Speaking in the same tone I used when talking to her as Lisa all those years ago, I conveyed my feelings. Melissa squeezed her eyes shut, nodding repeatedly with emotion, and said, "Thank you, Timothy. It feels amazing to have my feelings reach the person I love. You've taught me something wonderful once again." A year later, I visited Mr. Suzuki to formally ask for his blessing to marry his daughter. I had braced myself for anything, even a harsh rejection or a physical reprimand, but instead, Mr. Suzuki smiled gently and entrusted Melissa to me with his full support. Afterward, I returned to my former workplace in the editorial department. Ever since the day I stepped in as Melissa's substitute, my passion for work had reignited, and upon conveying this to Mr. Suzuki, he approved my transfer back. Meanwhile, Melissa joined the newly established international division, dedicating herself to promoting Greenleaf Publishing's works overseas. When we finally managed to take a long vacation together, we visited Amanda's home in the United States. The purpose of the visit was, of course, to thank her for being the one who had brought us together. Though we had invited Amanda to our wedding, her fear of boats and planes had prevented her from traveling to Japan. "I can't believe you two ended up together. Mind if I use this as inspiration for my next story?" Amanda, ever the writer, welcomed me warmly after 17 years while showing her creative streak. After Melissa and I expressed our gratitude, we took our time exploring the house where we had once spent so many memorable moments together. "Let's be happy, Timothy." She placed her hand on her stomach, reminiscing about the past. I placed my hand over hers and said, "Yes, for this little one as well." With that, I solidified my resolve to create a loving home where our future child could grow up surrounded by smiles. "Jake, please help me. If this goes on, the deal will definitely fail." Right after returning to work, the team leader, Michael, unexpectedly turned to me for assistance. Hearing the situation, I quickly got everything ready and headed to the rented meeting room where Michael and Monica were negotiating with a buyer from an overseas supermarket. When I arrived, Monica and Michael were struggling to communicate with a buyer speaking heavily Italian accented English. "Today, I'll prove my worth to the company." With this determination, I fully utilized my language skills to turn the situation around. "My name is Jake. They say life has several turning points, and lately, I've been wondering if I might have made the wrong choices. Objectively speaking, landing a job at Carter's Bread, a relatively well-known bakery in the country, at the age of 30, should be considered fortunate. However, once I started working there, I found that my skills as a traditional Japanese confectioner weren't being used at all. And I was stuck with sales work, which I wasn't good at and honestly found tiring. Why did a traditional Japanese confectioner end up employed at a bakery company? Carter's Bread has sold traditional Japanese confections alongside bread since its founding. Since graduating high school, I had worked in a Japanese confectionery shop. But when the shop's owner's chronic illness worsened, the store had to close. For the year following the closure, I used my savings to travel abroad, broadening my horizons. 6 months ago, thinking I might be able to use my skills, I applied for a job at Carter's Bread and was lucky enough to get hired. A former Japanese confectioner? That's amazing. We'd love to have you in our confectionery division. One key reason I got the job was that Michael, who oversees the Japanese confectionery division, was the one who interviewed me. I brought some handmade traditional Japanese confections to the interview to showcase my skills, and Michael expressed strong interest in working with me. However, the confectionery division at Carter's Bread was far worse than I had imagined. Despite having some demand due to its history and tradition, its sales didn't even reach 1/10 of the bakery division's. It was Monica, a colleague my age, who explained the reality of the confectionery division to me when I started. I never expected to reunite with her here. When I first saw her, I tried my hardest to keep a poker face so she wouldn't notice my surprise. Monica had her dark brown hair tied into a ponytail, and her slender legs, clad in tights, extended from the skirt of her business suit. Her big, expressive eyes and charming dimples when she smiled made her look like someone who could easily appear on TV as a celebrity. Even if you're an excellent Japanese confectioner, unfortunately, your skills can't be used here right now. The company doesn't intend to develop new products for the confectionery division, they just want to maintain the status quo. Hearing this from Monica in a calm tone, I instinctively glanced at Michael. Michael lowered his head slightly and said apologetically, "She's right. The confectionery division has been shrinking year by year. Still, I pushed hard for you to be hired, promising I'd help boost sales." Apparently, Carter's Bread's confectionery division was considered a dead-end department where no one expected results beyond maintaining the current situation. Even so, I won't give up. If you want to achieve something in the confectionery division, you need to deliver results and sales first. Unless you prove there's demand, the company won't allocate any budget for new product development. Pulling me by the arm, Monica said, "Come on, we're heading out now. I need you to start pulling your weight immediately." She then dragged me off to a sales fieldwork trip. According to Michael, Monica had graduated from a prestigious university and joined Carter's Bread as an elite employee. Until about a year ago, she had been excelling in the bread product development department, but her competence attracted the attention of her boss, leading to her being reassigned almost as a demotion to the confectionery division. Apparently, she had pointed out flaws in her boss's new product plan, which rubbed him the wrong way. Most people would have quit the company after such a reassignment. But instead, she stayed and resolved to prove her worth in the confectionery division. "That's what makes her remarkable," Michael said. Just as Michael described, Monica was the only one in the confectionery division among its 10 staff members who worked with genuine enthusiasm. The others had all adopted an air of resignation, simply going through the motions of their daily tasks. "I don't want you to become like them. So, I'll teach you everything I know about sales. Stick with me." On the way to the sales meeting, Monica said this with a captivating smile. It seemed that by teaching me sales skills, she hoped to contribute, even a little, to rebuilding the confectionery division. Despite her efforts, 6 months into my job at Carter's Bread, I still hadn't secured a single contract. I tried following her instructions step by step, but when it came to negotiations, I got so nervous that my body and mouth froze. I was the same at first. But you'll get used to it, so keep trying. Let's work hard to give Michael good news when he comes back. When I told Monica about my failures, she encouraged me with her charming smile. Michael was currently on leave to care for his parents and hadn't been to the office for about a month. He was expected to return in a few weeks, but I couldn't imagine delivering good news by then. Unable to confess these thoughts to Monica, all I could do was stammer, "I'll do my best." But besides my struggles with sales, I carried another burden of guilt when it came to Monica. Once again, I couldn't tell her today. As I muttered this on my way home, memories from middle school flashed in my mind. The truth is, Monica and I had been classmates in middle school. Not only that, but we also shared a memorable experience during a 1-month short-term study abroad program in the United States, where we stayed with the same host family. However, it seemed she didn't remember me. I had grown over 20 centimeters taller since middle school, and my appearance had changed significantly. Additionally, after my parents divorced during high school, I began using my mother's maiden name. It wasn't surprising that she didn't recognize me. Back then, I had a small admiration for her, and I didn't want her to know that the unremarkable classmate she once knew was now struggling. As a result, I couldn't bring myself to tell her we had been classmates in middle school. Instead, I carried this unresolved feeling as we continued working together. On the afternoon of Michael's return to work, Monica came back to the confectionery division's office with a beaming smile. When I asked what had happened with Michael, Monica proudly shared the news. I got a great tip from a friend in the PR department. A buyer from a supermarket chain headquartered in Italy, which operates primarily across Europe, is coming to Japan to scout for products. She excitedly explained how she secured a new sales opportunity. According to her, a buyer from a supermarket chain called Thompson Stores was scheduled to visit a rented meeting room near the station in 3 days. The bread division had also planned to pitch their products but was turned away after learning that the event wasn't open to bread suppliers. So, I reached out to see if they'd be interested in traditional Japanese confections instead, and they were. If we can get Thompson Stores to carry our products, it'll change how the company views the confectionery division. Monica's announcement electrified not only me and Michael but also the other confectionery division staff. After some discussion, it was decided that Monica, fluent in English, and Michael, with his extensive product knowledge, would represent us at the meeting. Although I wanted to contribute, tasks like preparing presentation materials were far better handled by other team members. There wasn't much I could offer in that area. Unsure of how else to help, I decided to prepare some handmade Japanese confections to boost my colleagues' morale. "Jake, this is amazing. I think this is the best daifuku I've ever had," Monica said, offering me the highest praise as she tasted one of the daifuku I brought. While Carter's Bread's confections are delicious, they're machine-made in a factory, and by the time they hit store shelves, a lot of time has passed since production. Monica seemed to appreciate the freshness of my homemade confections, prepared just that morning. If this sales pitch goes well, Jake will surely create an amazing new product. So, Michael, we absolutely have to succeed this time. After tasting my daifuku, Monica had a spirited conversation with Michael. Seeing how motivated she was, I felt relieved that, for the first time since joining the company, I had made a meaningful contribution. On the day of the meeting, Monica and Michael left the Carter's Bread office, cheered on by the confectionery division staff. The pitch involved meetings with multiple companies throughout the day, and there was a chance the schedule could be moved up. So the two left for the rented meeting room near the station with plenty of time to spare. Just before leaving, Monica, brimming with confidence, turned to me and said, "Make sure you have celebration confections ready for when we return." She then followed Michael out the door. It seemed she had enjoyed the daifuku I made earlier and wanted me to make more as a reward if the pitch was successful. Guess I should start the prep work. I began preparing the mochi and sweet red bean filling so I could finish the daifuku right after they returned. Once the prep was done, I turned to tackle some PC work, which I wasn't particularly skilled at. While struggling in front of the screen, my phone buzzed with a call from Michael. The meeting wasn't supposed to have started yet, so I wondered if something had gone wrong. Picking up the phone, I heard Michael's urgent voice asking for help. "Jake, I need your help. I think you're the only one who can fix this." Here's what happened. After hearing Michael's explanation, I informed my colleagues in the confectionery division, "Michael needs me at the meeting." I'm heading out to join them, and quickly got everything ready before leaving the office. An hour later, I arrived at the rented meeting room near the station. A woman from Thompson Stores guided me to the meeting room where the discussions were taking place. Inside, a large conference table separated Monica and Michael from a foreign man in a suit. However, it was clear from their furrowed brows that the conversation wasn't going well. "Jake? What are you doing here?" Monica looked at me in surprise, clearly unaware of Michael's call for backup. I nodded at her and said, "Leave this to me," before turning to the man in the suit. "Hello, my name is Jake. Actually, I used to live in Rome for a while." I addressed him in clear and deliberate English, aiming for easy comprehension. The man, whose expression had been tense until now, lit up and said, "Really? Your English is very easy to understand. I've been having trouble communicating because my accent seems hard for her to follow." He extended his hand for a handshake. His name was Leonardo Romano, an experienced buyer at Thompson Stores. He explained that he had never had much opportunity to interact with Japanese people in English and was surprised by how difficult it was for them to understand his heavily accented speech. Likewise, he found Monica's English too flat in intonation, which made it hard for him to follow, creating a communication barrier. "I also worked at a pastry shop in Rome, so I can understand your English without any problem." "Should we switch to Italian?" Switching mid-conversation to Italian, I asked him a question, leaving both Mr. Romano and Monica wide-eyed in surprise. It seemed neither of them had expected me to be this proficient in languages. "Your Italian pronunciation is excellent." "Then I'll take you up on your offer, let's continue in Italian." To be honest, Thompson Stores has never dealt in traditional Japanese confections before. "Do you think your products could resonate with Western consumers?" Faced with Mr. Romano's straightforward question, I handed him two types of daifuku. "Here is the daifuku currently sold domestically by our company. Please try this one first. Afterward, compare it with this second daifuku." Mr. Romano sampled both, the factory-produced Carter's bread daifuku and the handmade one I had prepared. Smiling, he pointed to the latter. "I prefer this one. The daifuku sold in Japan is a bit too sweet for my taste," he said. From his comments, I could tell that Mr. Romano had a refined palate. "Since I heard you're from Italy, I tailored this daifuku to suit the preferences of Italians. If Thompson Stores decides to sell our products, we'll develop the best traditional Japanese confections to suit the tastes of your local customers," I proposed. Mr. Romano nodded thoughtfully and took another bite of each daifuku, comparing them once more. With a thumbs up and a warm smile, he remarked, "So, this is what you call the spirit of hospitality? I've heard traditional Japanese confections are delicate, but your handmade daifuku reflects such meticulous attention to detail. I can tell it's adjusted to suit Italian tastes, not just in sweetness but in the texture of the mochi and the smoothness of the filling." Before long, he had polished off the remaining daifuku I had brought. His enthusiastic eating left Monica, Michael, and me exchanging amused glances. Taking a sip from a bottled tea to catch his breath, Mr. Romano playfully stuck out his tongue and confessed, "Actually, I once received traditional Japanese confections as a souvenir from a friend who traveled to Japan. I've been a fan ever since, but I rarely get the chance to enjoy them. That's why I overindulged today." He confessed that he was, in fact, a fan of traditional Japanese confections. When I translated his words for Monica and the others, their eyes lit up with excitement. "Jake, this is your chance. Forget the sales pitch I taught you, use your own words as a confectioner to convey the charm of traditional Japanese sweets to Mr. Romano," Monica urged. Encouraged by her words, I took a deep breath to steady myself and began speaking earnestly. "Traditional Japanese confections have been cherished for generations in Japan. They embody subtle sweetness, delicate textures, and the rich flavors of their natural ingredients, crafted with care and dedication by artisans." I paused, picking up the packaged daifuku from Carter's bread. "Our company has also worked tirelessly over the years to bring these confections to more people. Please, allow Thompson Stores to carry our products and share them with your customers." After finishing, I bowed deeply. Mr. Romano gently patted my shoulder and encouraged me to look up. "With someone like you behind the products, I'm confident we'll receive something exceptional. Let's sell your traditional confections at Thompson Stores," he said, extending his hand. Grateful and overwhelmed, I clasped his hand firmly with both of mine. Witnessing this, Monica and Michael let out sighs of relief, their faces reflecting their newfound hope. "Michael, you're the one who called Jake, weren't you?" "I was so surprised when he showed up out of nowhere," Monica said with a chuckle. After the successful meeting, Michael invited us to a family restaurant near the station for a small celebration. While the mood was festive, I still hadn't fully processed what had just happened. Michael, patting me on the shoulder, explained, while waiting in line for the restroom. "I overheard others from competing companies complaining about how they couldn't understand Mr. Romano's heavily accented English. That's when I remembered your multilingual skills and decided to call you." Hearing that information, Michael remembered my multilingual skills and decided to contact me. Responding to Michael's SOS, I quickly adjusted the daifuku I had planned to serve Monica and the others upon their return, tailoring it to suit Italian tastes, and rushed to the meeting. "I knew during your interview that you could speak multiple languages, Jake." Of course, I was fully aware that Monica speaks English too. But I wanted to be prepared for any situation, Michael said, puffing out his chest proudly. Monica, however, looked at me intently and murmured, "I didn't know you had such a talent, Jake." "That's a surprise." She then turned her attention to her steak, cutting into it thoughtfully. Just then, Michael's phone buzzed. "Oh, right. I need to report our success," he said, leaving the table in high spirits. Left alone with Monica, I decided it was finally time to share something I had kept to myself. The success of the meeting had given me the confidence I had been lacking. "Monica, there's something I'd like to tell you," I began, speaking about my middle school days and our shared memories during our study abroad experience. I described a particularly memorable night stargazing with our host family, where we had shared our dreams under the vast sky. As I spoke, Monica's eyes widened, and a look of realization dawned on her face. "Wait, you're telling me? Jake? Is it really you? I can't believe it. You've completely changed. I didn't recognize you. But now that you mention it, your eyes still have that familiar look. You were shorter than me back then, and now look at you." She kept nodding, visibly moved as she compared the boy she once knew to the man sitting in front of her. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I felt ashamed for not contributing to the company and couldn't bring myself to bring it up," I admitted, bowing my head. Monica let out a soft laugh and waved her hand. "You don't need to worry about that. And drop the formal language, we're the same age, after all. I always found it a bit odd when you used it. Just talk casually with me." "Really? Okay, I'll try," I replied hesitantly, attempting to adjust my tone. Before I could continue, Michael returned to the table. Just as I expected, the higher-ups were stunned. "I even secured funding for new product development. We're going to be busy starting tomorrow," he announced triumphantly. "That's amazing. Let's revive the confectionery division and make it shine again," Monica declared, her fist clenched with determination. My conversation with Monica was interrupted, leaving me a bit disappointed as I lowered my gaze. If only Michael had taken a little longer to return, I could have talked to her a bit more. As I was lost in thought, my phone buzzed in my pocket. When I checked the screen, there was a message from Monica, who had resumed eating. It read, "Let's have dinner together tonight. I have a lot I want to talk about." I couldn't help but glance at her. She subtly winked, ensuring only I noticed. Even with Michael sitting right there, Monica had sent me such a bold message. My heart raced with excitement. Though I felt my cheeks begin to relax into a smile, I quickly composed myself, determined not to let Monica or Michael see my expression. That evening, Monica and I were seated in a private room of a French restaurant, sharing dinner. There were no colleagues or supervisors, just the two of us. Monica, who had been beautiful even as a student, had matured into a graceful and confident woman. At first, Being alone with her made me incredibly nervous. But as we reminisced about our school days, we gradually grew more at ease. About an hour into our meal, Monica said, "So that's what happened." I'm sorry, I was so caught up with the move that I couldn't keep in touch. After returning from our study abroad trip in middle school, she moved with her family for her father's job just 3 months later. Meanwhile, my own high school years were consumed by my parents' divorce and the resulting upheaval, making it difficult to reconnect with her. It's not your fault, Monica. I couldn't reach out either with everything going on, I said, trying to reassure her. You should have told me sooner, she said, her tone slightly sulky, almost childlike, perhaps due to the bit of wine she had. Far from being annoying, it was undeniably charming. Sorry. But I did keep our promise, I stammered. She broke into a radiant smile and said, "You're right. I promised to work harder on foreign languages too, but you've completely surpassed me." It seemed she remembered the promise we made during the stargazing trip while studying abroad. Back then, I made a vow to Monica. I had boasted to her out of sheer competitiveness, "I'll learn tons of languages and leave you speechless. If I put my mind to it, French and Italian will be a piece of cake." To my surprise, she had responded with equal determination, "Oh, it's on. Let's see who can learn more languages." That moment had sparked my lifelong dedication to studying multiple languages. Even while working at the Japanese confectionery shop, I kept up my self-study. After the shop closed, my passion for languages and sweets led me to travel the world, learning about traditional confections and testing my language skills in real-life settings. Thank you so much for today. If it weren't for you, the meeting would have been a disaster. And knowing you remembered our promise makes me really happy, Monica said sincerely after dessert. I shook my head. I was only able to do it because of that promise. Wanting to impress you kept me motivated. If I've been able to help you now, it was all worth it. Gathering my courage, I confessed the feelings I had held onto since our school days. She gave me a mischievous smile and asked, "What do you mean by impress?" Looking her straight in the eyes, I said, "I liked you. I wanted the girl I liked to rely on me. I thought if I could speak more languages than you, that'd do it." It's childish looking back, but my feelings haven't changed. I still like you. Worried that my sudden confession might overwhelm her, I anxiously awaited her response. Monica exhaled slowly, a mix of surprise and warmth in her expression. The new guy I thought was pretty cool turns out to be the boy I once shared so many memories with. It's almost too perfect. Looks like we've been in love with each other all along, she said, wiping a tear from her eye. After 15 years of separation, a series of coincidences had brought us back together. That night, Monica and I took our first step as a couple. In the years that followed, Carter's Bread's confectionery division steadily grew its sales by expanding into international markets. Thanks to my fluency in 7 languages, a skill honed through our promise, I successfully pitched Carter's Bread's Japanese confectionery to supermarkets and department stores across Europe, Asia, and beyond. Leveraging my experience as a Japanese confectionery craftsman, I also contributed to the development of new products. Within 3 years, I was promoted to assistant manager. Today, my direct supervisor and the division's current manager is none other than my wife, Monica. This little one will definitely take after us and love Japanese confectionery. After all, it has been enjoying so much of it even before being born. Once I go on maternity leave, I'm counting on you to take care of the confectionery division, Monica said gently, rubbing her slightly rounded belly with a serene tone. I nodded confidently. Don't worry. With all the training you gave me, I've got sales and product development covered. I've even been brainstorming Japanese confectionery ideas perfect for kids. Looking forward to the day my child could enjoy Japanese confectionery I had made, I vowed to keep working hard for my family's future.